Actually, I'll ask her to do it.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting of the town of Littleton for Monday, June 11th, 2018. Madam Clerk, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our member Chuck DeCoste will not be joining us tonight. Happy anniversary to he and Maureen. And we have a full agenda, which I will read through. We do have a number of mail pieces that Keith will guide us through, and we have a number of procurement and other issues with various town departments, highway procurements, resurfacing contract, replace dump truck, middle school sidewalk project, police chief with police vehicle procurements, liquor license compliance check violations, update. C, intermunicipal agreements with Boxborough regarding first, the animal control officer, and second, Littleton Community Television Services. And D, fire chief advanced life support, 1, and implementation, update, and 2, intermunicipal agreements. At approximately 7:10, we will entertain public input and members' updates, followed by our first round of annual town board appointments at 7:15. Not binding ourselves, but anticipating Conservation Commission, Council on Aging, Finance Committee, Master Plan Implementation Committee, Taxation Aid Committee, Transportation Advisory Council, and Zoning Board of Appeals. A second round, that'll be at our next meeting on the 25th, Keith, is that right?
That's right.
So anything here we either don't cover, other meetings that are not, boards that are not listed here, and anything we don't reach agreement on tonight or decide to put off, we can do on the 25th. 8 o'clock, other town boards have business with the selectmen. First, the Conservation Commission, Cloverdale project update. We had a site walk, which I think was very informative last Thursday. And secondly, the library trustees are looking to give us a update on the MBLC building project. At approximately 8:40, we'll have various topics from the town administrator, assistant town administrator. First and foremost, not necessarily foremost, the Littleton Westford Commuter Rail Shuttle Park and Ride updates. B, reappoint Montechusett Regional Transit Authority representative. And C, management employment contract amendments per the fiscal year 2019 Schedule A. And those are for the deputies of the police and fire departments, the chiefs of the police and fire departments, the director of finance and budget, assistant town administrator, and the town administrator. 9 o'clock, other business, minutes approval, and 9:05, executive session. We have two different topics relative to the value of land. And our intention is to go into executive session with, to adjourn after. Okay. And with that, Keith, if you want to lead us through some of the town department topics, or your mail
Sure,
first.
yeah,
excuse
just
me.
a couple of things in the mail packet in terms of updates, just sharing this report that Governor Charlie Baker was in Littleton last Wednesday for the grand opening of Middlesex Corporation's Massachusetts Ready Mix concrete plant. So we were happy to be able to welcome the governor here. And then just a couple of meetings coming up tomorrow morning in Boston. MAPC and the 495 Metro-West Partnership is sponsoring an initial meeting of what's being called a commuter rail community coalition. There are a number of cities and towns in the around Boston who have commuter rail stations, who have issues about service, and we typically just go at it one line at a time. You know, we've had the Fitchburg Line Working Group forever, that we talk about issues of importance up and down this line. The intent here is to take a more holistic approach, because the issues that the mayor of Salem may have about her station is the same sorts of issues that we have about ours or that other communities are having. So it's a chance maybe to see if by looking at a more global strategy, we can have a better relationship with the MBTA and the service levels. So, and then there is a meeting on Thursday at 8:30 in Westboro. This is also sponsored by MAPC and the 495 Partnership, and it is to take a look at so-called priority development areas, which you may recall back in 2011, 2012, there was a 495 Metro West Community Compact that then Secretary Greg Bielecki did for many of the communities in the region, from which the state established development priorities and preservation priorities for our region. And in Littleton's case, we had some, this is what our priority, in dark green is what our priority preservation areas look like. The yellow, which is Littleton Common, and the area around the train station were seen as priority development areas. So those are state priorities, and so they're looking at how those properties are faring, the current administration is looking at just updating the data that they'd relied on from the previous one. So also would report that the state legislature has a committee hearing on Wednesday at 11 o'clock this week on our home rule petition for retirement benefits for firefighter Scott Holt, so I'll be attending that as well.
You think that's sufficient? Do we have any indication?
I think so, yeah, that I would welcome the chief or deputy to come along to that.
But you've talked to either Jamie or Jim's office?
Yeah, they advised me of when the hearing was.
And didn't feel the one is sufficient, right?
Well, usually, the committee has scheduled 1 hour to do a whole bunch of bills, so you get 3 minutes. But it's important to put in the appearance and to show interest in the bill, so we'll be there. That's it.
That's it for the mail? Okay, good. All right, highway procurements, or Public Works as it's known in some quarters.
Depends on who you ask.
That's right.
Okay. I can click through your presentation, or I can give you the keys.
Whatever's easier.
Let me just make sure it's working. Working. Button.
Okay, so we, this is kind of basically the same roads and that we were, that was on the plan last year with a few edits, primarily because of the winter we had to move a few things around. But so this was, fast. So this was the list we had last year. It's the same slide I've updated. We just did DPW 2018. The only change is we've actually moved Harwood up to this year. Not the whole extent, but a good portion of it. So this is the map. Everything in yellow you see here are all roads that we've currently put out a contract for and are intending to mill and overlay or reclaim or reconstruct. So this is the list. So last year we did about 16 miles of road, microsurfacing, crack sealing, and whatnot. This year we're proposing 15.03. Last year's PCI, if you remember, I projected it to move up to about a 68 out of 100. This year, we're projecting it up to 71. Next year, I propose, we're actually going to go out and re-rate our roads to confirm that our projections are accurate. We haven't done it for about 4 years. This is on the side, as you can see the cost breakdown. We have about 400,000 left from FY18's appropriation, plus the 720,000 for the FY19, plus our Chapter 90 gives us about 1.6. We're projected to spend about 1.53, 1.52 of that. So these are the roads we're actually going to pave this year. Harwood Ave, and all of these are the same as I said last year with the, except for Roxbury Drive. That road is just falling apart going into the school. It's short, it's cheap money to get it fixed. Hartwell Ave and Murray Park took it particularly hard this winter. We were there literally every single day patching it, so. Taylor Street from Harvard Road to the state layout was another one. We were on that road every single day this winter. All the rest of them, like I said, are on the list as of last year, but those are the additions to it.
The $75,000 differential savings, a little less than you anticipated. Does that just go free cash, Monty, or
Sorry.
back on the FY 18-19 funding was, or explain to me if I'm missing
Yeah,
something.
no, so the reason I try not to go right to the penny for unforeseens, we do estimates for structure counts and
Yeah.
roads, police details, we kind of do an estimate, but the other reason, what we do is we actually roll it over year. And so what we would do is, because we know the TIP funding, we have to pay for design, I have 200,000 in there for 25% design funding. I know next year is gonna come up approximately another 175,000 to take it from 25% to 100.
I guess my question is more on the financial process. Does this just follow our free cash guidelines, or how is it?
Any funds that are not expended by year-end are actually encumbered for the following fiscal
Okay.
year, so it stays within the roadway account. It just is a carry forward.
Okay, so there is a carry forward, and if I remember correct, doesn't the Chapter 90 have to be spent in the year?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, right, okay, so,
No, that's not true.
Oh, I thought it did.
No, we carry it forward as well.
used to be, you had to spend it in the year you got
I'm
it.
sorry.
Chapter 90, we can
Okay.
carry, Chapter 90, we
Typically, we
do,
do spend it in a year.
we do spend it every year, but
like
we don't
2 years
have
ago, we
to.
didn't.
Right, probably best to spend their money first.
Exactly, we try to spend all the
Should
money.
they change
Their
their
money
mind?
first and our money last.
Right,
We had to save it for New State Road. We had to do 2 years worth.
Yes.
and it shows.
And so then, again, this year, we're gonna be doing fog sealing and microsurfacing and crack sealing again. The big one here is we're gonna end up doing Goldsmith Street, so that's a big road.
Getting any kind of feedback from residents on that, the fog ceiling and?
Well, we did during it, they didn't, I think we could have done a better job at informing them, so this year we're taking different steps. We're gonna be a little more proactive, we're gonna do door hangers a little bit farther in advance if we can, so yeah, we've taken some of that feedback. Other than that, I mean, just the simple questions, why are you paving our road? Because our road's not that bad, but after we kind of explain to them, that's not really paving it, it's a.
Preserving it.
Preserving it, they tend to kind of understand.
So everyone knows, what's the difference between fog sealing and crack sealing?
Crack sealing is we just do the cracks. Fog sealing is we do a layer over the entire road. So fog sealing we tend to do on roads that haven't gotten to the point where you have to crack seal yet, doesn't have as many cracks. The idea is the fog sealing pushes off having to crack seal probably 2 or 3 years down the road. That's the hope.
Visually more attractive too.
Yeah, it looks like it's becomes brand new pavement again.
Do you have any sense of the timing on some of the sealing work, particularly on, particularly on Goldsmith? Have you figured out when you're gonna try and attack that?
Yeah, we're tentatively 4th of July week. Is the hope.
Good choice.
No traffic, good.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the.
tough for your crews, but good,
It's all,
good for the
it's all
town.
contract work, so it's, if they want to do it, they do it. Obviously, if we get 2 or 3 weeks of heavy rain between now and then, that gets pushed off, but the thought right now is to try to get all of microsurfacing and fog sealing done the week of 4th of July. Then you can see these are the microsurfacing roads. We're trying to kind of stay in some neighborhoods, get some of those done, so we can hopefully preserve those. And then the 5-year outlook, Mattawanakee Trail is still on. We have a portion of it we're going to try to get done the end of this summer, or it will go on in the spring. I'm calling it Phase 1, Phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be this section. We have to split it up. It's too much money to do in 1 year. I can't afford it all. Hartwell Ave, that'll be the next section, Birch, and so on and so forth. I haven't picked microsurfacing, crack sealing, or fog seal roads. I typically do those in the fall or in the spring, depending on how bad the winter was. I kind of check them again in the spring. FY21, this one's still the big one. Tehadawon Road needs a water main. At this point, the water department still is not cooperating with wanting to install the water main, so this will probably end up getting pushed down the list a little bit, because we don't want to repave it and then them come in a couple years later. 2022 is the same thing. Russell Street's got the, I believe it's a 12-inch water main, 10-inch water main that, as you have all seen, continues to break. I kind of joke it's getting replaced 2 feet at a time. But that, we can't repave that road until that gets done either. Then 2023, all three of those need water main as well. So the vast majority of our 5-year outlook here, most of it's directly related to water main.
Where does gas come in? Have you gotten reasonable information and
Yeah.
estimates from
Yeah, so the gas department's,
National Grid?
for the most part, really good to work with. I give them my schedule in the fall, they do the work the next year.
Okay.
So with this, if we were gonna go, let's just use Russell Street, because I know they need a new gas main out there. If I could do it in 2022, I would tell them probably next year, or the year after, hey, you need to have that replaced, and they will.
So
put-
we're driving the bus on that a
Yes.
little bit rather
Yeah,
than the
yeah, they
other
don't
way
drive
around.
the bus for us. They,
Okay.
we basically dictate where they go. Harwood Ave, the reason they did that in that portion of King Street is because we are going to overlay that eventually. So we asked them to get in there first, and they're very receptive to it. They need to do a certain amount of miles a year anyways, so.
Sure.
The more they can do to help us, the better off they are.
And their planning cycle is a year,
It's about a
year and change.
It's actually, can even be a little less. If I had to rush one and said, hey, I have to put this on, they can get out there in less than 6 months if need be.
Okay.
They don't like to, but they can. And then Foster Street, so you all know we got on the tip. So this is kind of a rough outline of what I think the timeline's going to be.
We've updated this one
Yeah.
since Friday.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, this I worked on this.
We wanted to give you some more information on that.
Yeah.
So
Good.
the 25% design, the 171,485 is the contract price, so we've already signed the contract. So they're starting to work forward that. We believe they'll be able to finish that by around the fall, at which point we'll come before the board and the public and give a presentation of kind of the options, what we're looking at to submit to Mass DOT for 25% design.
How many options do you anticipate presenting?
2, but we're gonna really heavily lean towards one that makes the most sense for the area, cost and aesthetics wise. And we also have to weigh the option of if the Mass DOT will approve it or not. We can't,
And this one, just to jump ahead, this is for the scope of between Taylor Street and Balsam Lane, that was the limit of what
that's what Mass DOT
the
approved.
TIP approved, the MassDOT approved project is.
Yeah. And so at some point, I'm guessing in the spring, Mass DOT will have the same design public hearing as we did at the Bruce Street light, probably in this room. Summer 2019, we're hoping, once we get the design public hearing, we can then go proceed to 100% design. I have 200,000 in there for a placeholder. I usually use the 10% number. If the project's 3.6 million, 360,000, so. Hopefully fall of 19, winter of 2020, we can have full design bid docs ready to go. And then it becomes a push to convince the MPO to get us on there as quick as possible. So we
But it
should,
would still be a number of years.
Yeah.
It took us, with Goldsmith Street through the NPO, it took 10 years. Maybe this project could,
yeah, the key to this one is proving that we are shovel ready and hoping that they have a dropout and saying, we're here, it's right off the shelf,
Yeah.
just let us go. So it's just a little bit of a push to the MPO, just say, hey, don't forget, we're here, we're ready, whenever if you haven't.
You're correct, though. The key is to actually have your 100% plans done, and then, because until that's done, you're not even standing in line to get the construction.
So the goal is next winter, next Christmas time, next year, we have a shovel-ready project. Yeah, and like we said, this is the extent, and then, so moving forward on Foster Street, I know I've heard a substantial amount of conversation about trying to get the rest of the road improved. The original project we went for Mass DOT was to do the whole from Harwood all the way to Taylor. Mass DOT didn't think that the cost-benefit ratio was too high, so they decided not to want to go for that. They thought this made more sense
To cut it down
To
to
cut it
just
down, yeah.
near the commuter rail
Yeah,
station.
so, but what we are looking at, and this is the traffic counts, so
Yes.
it really, oh, yeah, there we go. So, this is the whole project, originally what we envisioned is doing a roundabout at Harwood Ave, and then doing from there all the way to Taylor Street, so. My opinion is we can get the free money, I'll just call it, up to the train depot or to Balsam. We can still look as a town to actually implement this ourselves. It does two things for us. One is we don't have to go through Mass DOT's design process, which is incredibly expensive and laborious and doesn't need to be done. This is not real, it's a high-speed road, but it's kind of a country road at the same time. So we can actually look into designing the roundabout ourselves and constructing it ourselves. At that point, then, we now have an interconnect, because Mass DOT does like to do what they call fill the gaps. So if we have a roundabout, the TIP project, we come up to Foster, to Hadawan, we then have a fighting chance of saying, can you fill the gaps between the two? Even if they can't, it's still not an overly difficult design, just to get a sidewalk on one side and reconstruct that road. It's not cheap, but it's not out of the question of us being able to do it with town funding, just having to do it in a few phases. We have the developer down on Mill Road who is putting in approximately 200 feet of sidewalk on the edge of the road with my guidance to put it in the correct spot, so that way I can then connect the dots from Foster to Hadawan up to Mill Road with a sidewalk, and then now we only have a small piece from Mill Road to, if we were to build this roundabout. So the idea is to get this done. I just can't afford within the appropriations in Mass Chapter 90 to do it all in one lump sum. So I'm trying to take a common sense phased approach that I can get it all done without breaking the bank.
Do you have any concerns about the road alignment coming into the roundabout?
Yep. My goal is, my guess is, just off the top of my head, I'm gonna raise the intersection 3 feet. Which will basically, because if you look at it, every road does this into it. I can raise that 3 feet and every road will come into it, except for coming from the train station, basically flat.
Do you anticipate the need to adjust any of the plan view layouts of the roads, or the angles and curves?
I'm
and kind of-
hoping not. I believe probably coming around the corner from the train station down to the round, what would be the roundabout. It's a fairly sharp corner. I'm hoping we can work within the layout
Okay.
and not need takings. I know we do own I'll call it the park there, so that does help us a little bit. We don't need to worry about takings on that side. The back of the envelope, it works.
Okay.
For the most part, I mean, I will make it work. It's just a matter of, I can't fund $7 million worth of work, obviously, in 1 year. So, but I'm trying to take a, decent stab at it.
All right, so the action you're looking for is and I'll ask if the board members have any further questions or comments on Chris's proposed pavement management plan, and the action we're looking for is a vote on the roadwork contract.
Oh, to Lazaro?
Yeah.
Okay.
But before that, do we have any question? Everybody happy with the update?
I just want
Yeah.
to mention one thing. I'm glad you brought up the part, Chris, about the other part of Foster Street that's not getting done, because there were so many questions that were being asked about that. And why would the state ever go for the other part? At least if people can see that there's a plan and, the town is moving forward, not just letting it go. So I thank you very much for that.
From day one since I started, it was the whole, I've always been told or heard how Foster Street was a priority. And I do have a plan.
Good.
That's great. Ready?
Clerk?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to award and authorize execution of a resurfacing and related work with Lazaro Paving Corp. of Shirley, Mass. for its bid of $697,502.50, with execution of said contract subject to receipt of performance and payment bonds and certificates of insurance.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And you're gonna abstain?
And I do need to recuse myself of that.
Okay,
A
abstain.
bid, yes.
If you want to.
Yeah, I
Explain it for the
happen to
record.
have Lazaro has a bid out with me for private work, so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to vote on this, though I have no particular.
Go ahead, go ahead.
He has a recusal a week, this guy. Well, good, let the record show that, and it was an abstention, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, good. You have a couple more for us, Chris?
We just need approval to actually sign to purchase the new dump truck to replace one of our, I believe, the 92s. We haven't decided which one yet, because we won't get this truck for about 8 months. We don't want to commit to one and something happens. The truck's $130,000, and then the body, the plows, the lights, the hydraulics are another $111,000 plus or minus, which stays under the amount which was approved at town meeting.
Yeah. And consistent with our capital plan? Okay, board members, any questions, comments? Madam Clerk?
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 8 of the May 7th, 2018 Annual Town Meeting to approve award of a contract in the amount of $130,226 to McDewitt Trucks, Inc. of Tewksbury, Massachusetts for the purchase of a new Mack six-wheel dump truck cab and chassis, and $110,950 to J.C. Madigan, Inc. of Lancaster, Massachusetts for accessories for said vehicle.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, and another one?
Yeah, so this is the sidewalk reconstruction, removal, replacement at the middle school. This design, everything was done in-house, all the survey, all the design, all the bidding. We put it out to bid, I think we got 4 back, and Allied Paving came in the cheapest. So the goal is to have this start as soon as we can to school getting out, and it will be done before school starts again.
Yeah, and I assume the school officials are all aware of this?
Yeah, they are. We'll have a pre-construction meeting, they'll all be invited to attend, so that everybody's aware. Park and Rec, I know they use the facility in the summer, they'll be there, because we'll have to have provisions for them to enter and exit from the rear of the building.
Does the condition of those sidewalks, given their age, surprise you?
Yes and no, I don't believe they were constructed correctly. I don't think.
I guess that's what I'm
I
getting
don't
at.
think they sealed them. In our contract, we have sealer
Okay.
stacked into it, so that way it refrains. And I don't know when that building was built, but based on it, my guess is it was built somewhere late summer, early fall, and it didn't have time for that concrete to cure before salt hit it. So we're hoping to get it done earlier, and we're gonna seal it.
I mean, it was a while ago. Do we know if we have any I generally agree that something seems like it was not well constructed there. Obviously, it was a leading
Yeah,
question.
I mean, I've seen it before in other towns, and it's the same thing if we build it in the fall. You really need almost 6 months to do this, because it's a school, it's hard to do that, because you'd have to build it in June or April, and that's just not realistic. But you can put sealers on there to prevent the sodium chloride from destroying the concrete, so.
And we're too far out past their original construction to have any recourse there for.
Yeah, there's usually a 1-year guarantee, but I don't know how old that building is, 15 years now, maybe?
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're putting granite curb in this time too, so that'll help. Obviously, we won't get the deterioration of the curb line, and we should, hopefully, any of that splatter of salt should stay down more than it is currently.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Okay, any other points? Otherwise, Madam Clerk?
Ready? Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 12 of the October 30th, 2017 Special Town Meeting to award for the middle school reconstruction improvement contract in the amount of $73,746.50 to Allied Paving of Chelmsford, Mass., with execution of said contract subject to receipt of performance and payment of bonds and certificates of insurance.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Safe drive.
Thank you.
All right, next up is
Police.
interim chief, Bernard. Is that the appropriate title? Is that what we agreed on, interim?
Acting.
Acting? Oh, acting.
Acting, that could have different connotations.
Yeah, right, I kind of like,
It's like I'm practicing a term.
we have to use it for another couple of weeks, right? Right. Right, okay. You've got some, you have a procurement issue as well as compliance check violations, so please walk us through the procurement first.
Sure, procurement. The first one will be 2 police cruisers. One is the Ford Interceptor, fully marked police cruiser, and the other one is going to be the administrative vehicle to replace Chief King's vehicle.
Why did he not return it?
We gotta move it down the line.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions? All right, motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Article 8 of the May 7th, 2018 Annual Town Meeting to authorize procurement of MHQ municipal vehicles, Marlborough, Mass., procurement from MHQ municipal vehicles, Marlborough, Mass., under Greater Boston Police Chief Council Bid 2, 2018 Ford Police Utility Inceptors, 1 marked and 1 administrative vehicle fully equipped totaling $101,609.35.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, on the violations, if you don't mind, Chief, since this is a first for you, I would perhaps ask Keith to walk us through the process by law and what our practice has been here, and then defer to you to explain to us each of the situations in whatever level of detail you're comfortable with, and then I guess we have to go ahead and schedule some.
Sure, and it may be useful to know that it's been 5 years, at least 5 years that that the police department has been doing its compliance check violations on underage, on sales to underage persons. And this is the first year when the report is that there were violations. And it's been, when I look back, it's been a number of years since we've even had a hearing on any liquor license violation. A couple of times it's been for sales to intoxicated persons. We haven't had hearings on sales to minors. When those have happened because of compliance checks, more typically it would be a compliance check that was undertaken by the Massachusetts ABCC, Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, on their own motion, on their own action. And so we would be informed of the results of those decisions. And in fact, in some cases, typically for a first offense, it might be a short suspension, which is then held in abeyance for a period of time. The thing to focus on with the compliance check violations is that it is meant to be an educational exercise. The purpose is not a gotcha. It's to identify weaknesses in the system so that there actually are not sales to underage persons.
And nobody's actually charged with any
Right, I
criminal
mean, because
offense.
it's an agent of the police that would, it would be the person that would have purchased the, in the case of the compliance check, would have purchased the alcohol, as compared to a case where where there were, say, a complaint because an underage person that was not under our control purchased it and something went awry. That's a quite different matter. In fact, the Board of Selectmen's policies in Littleton are sort of written around that other case, not an internal compliance check, but rather, what do you do when one of your licensees sells to an underage person? For that, you've got a policy which has long been in place, which has some significant penalties, in fact, for first violation, 30-day suspension. However, in the case of compliance checks, it's a different scale. It's a much lower scale, and one of the things that town council has done, and is in your packet for your consideration, is at some point we need to actually amend your licensing policies and procedures to reflect, in the case of code compliant, of compliance checks, the standards that the ABCC would support. So that's an item to be done. The votes in front of you tonight would be the matter of scheduling hearings with each of the 5 licensed establishments. I should say that the chief has informed us that they conducted checks on all 18 licensed establishments in town, and there were 5.
Can the chief maybe
Yeah.
describe it, as to say, to the level you feel comfortable what each of the offenses were and what process there was?
Yeah, sure. Just a little background as to how the compliance check started with Littleton PD. The board at the time wanted to have kind of control of us doing our own compliance checks in town, not just the ABCC going into town doing their own checks. So we have 3 officers that are alcohol agents, Deputy Chief Patterson, Detective Sergeant Fernandez, and Detective O'Donoghue. They attended a 3-day seminar, came back to the board, they were all sworn in to be our town alcohol agents. And I don't like the word sting when we say sting operation, because we're not trying to catch them and say, aha, we got you. What we're trying to do is just show them, okay, we went in with an underage drinker, and he brought money in, and they sold to you. Not anything out of the ordinary, not a fake ID, or anything like that. So on May 11th, they started a program. We're working with Fitchburg State University Criminal Justice Program, and we had 6 of their students come down, and we set up the operation that night. They went and did all 18 establishments. Just a little background how they do the establishments. If it's a package store, they are no personal belongings on them whatsoever, no IDs, no cash. They're assigned to one of the investigators. The investigator brings them to the actual package store or restaurant, gives them a certain amount of money, tells them what they have to go in and request. They walk into the store, they grab whatever alcoholic beverage they want to grab, they go to the counter. At the counter, if they're asked for their ID, they just say, I left it in the car, and they walk out. If they're not asked for ID, they exchange the money, take the purchase, walk out, hand the purchase over to the investigator. At that point, they leave, and the detective sergeant follows up with the manager at that night, or with whoever's selling that at that time, at the clerk. After they did that, so we had 5 different violations that night. So that was the package store, and then the restaurant portion of it was, they go in, 1 or 2 together, they order a couple drinks. If they're ID'd, they walk out. If they get their drinks, they ask for the bill and say they have to leave. They get a receipt, and they walk out, turn the receipt over to the investigator at that time. Again, the detective sergeant goes in, has a conversation with the manager or the owner, lets them know what happens. The next day, they were followed up with by Detective O'Donoghue. Every single business owner knows exactly the violation, what time it happened, and we're showing the evidence against it. So again, it puts control in our hands here in town. And takes
Did any of the owners dispute any of the circumstances?
Matter of fact, a couple of the managers actually got rid of the bartenders. They were let go from the business working there on the spot. So they took it pretty serious, I will say that.
So procedurally, Keith, we're gonna schedule hearings and...
Procedurally, that since this has never come up, of what do you do? To preserve all our options, that you, since there is a report of a violation, is to schedule a hearing. Under the statute, you cannot take action against a license without a hearing for which the licensee gets due notice. So town council reminds us it would be 5 separate hearings, that you, and it would be difficult to predict, it'd be difficult for me to predict how long those hearings would take. Would would it be an hour and a half some night in a regular meeting? Would it be a special meeting or whatever? But in any event, the way you start, whether you open the hearing and then continue it to a later time, but step 1 would be to actually call the hearing, we'll send notices out, and you can at least open the hearings at an agreed-upon date. I'd recommend that you not do it at your next regular meeting on June 25th. We've got some other business we want to get done, but we have meetings on July 9th and 23rd. So if you wanted to pick one of those or another
Well,
night.
we don't, a motion here wouldn't have to be the date certain, would it?
You should, the motion should, yeah, in the motion, I haven't said what it is, but you ought to state what it is, because we'll need to send notices out.
Then why don't we aim for the first one in July, the 9th?
July
unless-
9th,
yeah, if
sure,
Unless you
okay.
know of some reason that that's not gonna work.
Right, and if need be, the way you fix that is by sending them an amended notice
There you
with their
go.
date, yeah.
All right, and, any questions either on the process or the actual incidents for Chief Bernard? Yeah, Joe?
On our own policy, since it's written in black and white, do we have to change our policy before we have this hearing? Because it says right here what it's supposed to be. Obviously, it's not what we intend to do.
I would say that it would be well to amend the policy before the hearing.
And that's part of the reason we don't wanna have one
Yeah,
next,
so you
the
could
next
amend
meeting.
it. So you could vote to receive the policy at tonight's meeting, and then you could vote to adopt it at your next meeting. So that could be a
I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of revising a policy to deal with something that essentially happened under an old.
Well, but you don't have the authority to, the policy, your existing policy, if you followed it, you would be overturned. You cannot issue a 30-day suspension for the first offense for a compliance check. You could for sales to minor, but not with the
But
sales to
the
minor.
change here is just to become
compliance check.
consistent with the state.
Right, and in fact, we're not proposing that you delete your existing guidelines, but rather that you add a new section that we don't have now on how do you handle compliance check violations, simply to be consistent with what the ABCC policy is.
You comfortable, any more comfortable with that?
Because no matter what your written policy says, if you adopt anything outside of the ABC guidelines, by the time if you were to adopt, if you were to suspend the license and for longer than the ABCC allows you, then they'd overturn your.
So the ABC guidelines changed, but our policy didn't.
Right.
To catch up to it.
Well, it seems like the
also they-
guidelines are not rigorous guidelines, but rather the result of adjudicating various,
Right,
Well,
experience.
Variance
really.
issues.
we've had no cases of sales to minors in 10 years.
In the suspensions that are in the new proposed language are less than they had been, so there shouldn't be any complaint from the
no,
violators.
no, and I understand, I
Right.
just, it makes me uncomfortable to revise something after the fact, but I understand the purpose and premise here, and
Right.
really what it comes down to is the dispensing liquor to minors. If our bylaw had said up to a 30-day suspension, we could work within it. The fact that it requires a 30-day suspension
Right.
blindly is really the problem, and then the rest of it is just
And if
updating.
we'd happened to revise our policies 2 months ago, wouldn't be an issue, because we would have caught this. It's just kind of a timeliness issue. We're just
All
in
the
the
more
beginning.
reason to be
We're-
doing a
yeah,
comprehensive update of the
That's
bylaws.
that's
that
right,
you've already-
yes.
And I actually
Right away.
included this in that list I
Is it?
sent you, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
So, yeah, your point's well taken, and Chase, I'm just
Yeah.
not sure we can do anything differently.
right.
right, I mean, the fact that it would be overtly
Okay.
contradictory.
So do we need two motions then,
Yeah,
Keith?
two
One is
motions, yeah.
a date certain on the hearings, and then a second one to accept the policy?
To vote to receive the policy.
Receive the policy.
As the policy revisions as drafted by.
And that's in
town council.
the, I gave them red ink on my white piece of paper here. I don't know how you have it on your,
It's in red ink on that.
okay. Yours is working?
Okay, so we're just going to schedule these for July 9th?
Yeah. And modify it if we have to, we'll start there.
Okay,
But it's a place to start. So if you've got a motion, Madam Clerk?
sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30, 138, Section 64, to schedule individual hearings for July 9th to consider whether or not to modify or suspend the following licenses for violations of compliance checks conducted on May 11th, 2018 by the Littleton Police Department on service of alcohol to a minor under the age of 21. Number 1, Anthony's Cold Fired Pizza of Littleton, DBA Anthony's Cold Fired Pizza, Eric Stanley, Bush Manager, 201 Constitutional Avenue, All Alcohol Restaurant. Number 2, 3Gs and J Inc., DBA Common Convenience, Joseph Mansour, Manager, 5 Stevens Street, Wine and Malt Package Store. Number 3, Point Hospitality LLC, DBA Marriott Courtyard, Boston, Littleton, Tom Burkhart, Manager, 102 Constitution Avenue, All Alcohol Restaurant. Jatman Inc., DBA Masala Bay, Navdeep Singh, Manager, 501 Constitution Avenue, All Alcohol Restaurant, and Common Foods Inc., DBA Littleton Sub Shop, 486 King Street, Greg Elgers, Manager, All Alcohol Restaurant.
Second?
Okay, motion's made and seconded then. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. How about, do you have any language, Keith?
I
on-
don't have it, I can recite it, and then it'll be in your minutes. It would be a motion to accept, to receive, a motion to receive the proposed amendments to the liquor license policy as drafted by town council, and to schedule their adoption at the next regular meeting.
And drafted by town council and included in our packet.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that a motion you'd make, Madam Clerk?
Sure.
So moved.
So moved.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
You could just say so
oh,
moved.
so moved, perfect.
Okay.
All right, good.
I'm sure you're up to it, but we
Oh,
just
yeah,
wanted
no,
to-
we're good.
A second.
Second, motion's made and seconded. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you. Is the chief still here for the intermunicipal agreement, or who takes the lead on that?
Sure, he can stay for the dogs. And next item is, is this our fourth year in a row now with the animal control? We have two,
Oh, yes, two
yeah,
intermunicipal
we had two
agreements.
intermunicipal agreements with the town of Boxborough.
Friends in
One-
Boxborough.
One
We get
where
along
they
with
are
them.
providing us with services, and the other where we are providing them. And in the case of this first one, it's the fifth year that Boxborough has provided animal control officer services to Littleton. And it works out that Boxborough has a full-time operation, and the costs of that are split between three towns, Boxborough, Littleton, and Stowe. So, and we're continuing on for another year.
All right. So the LCTV one comes up first, I think, or did I miss something? No, the first one is the...
Animal control is
Animal
first.
control,
Yeah.
all right.
I
And,
figured because the chief would be here for that.
yes, thank you. Board have any other questions or comments on that? It's working pretty well.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I'll accept a motion, please.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize execution of an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Boxborough for provision by Boxborough of animal control officer services to Littleton with a term of July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019, at a cost of $26,757.
$657, right?
$26,657, yeah.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, chief.
The second agreement is provision by Littleton of services to Boxborough, and in this case, it's for cable TV services. And this agreement is our, let's see, which year, is this our third year?
Believe so.
I think I wrote.
This is the second one, yeah, third year.
Yeah, 2015 was the first one.
Yeah. And they are very pleased with the services that are provided. It was through this IMA that we were able to increase Kirby Dolak's time from a part-time to a full-time position, because we knew that we would then be covering that additional cost from this contract.
We see it in a lot of increased board coverage as well as other community events that get covered, yeah. Okay, any further questions, discussion points? I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize execution of an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Boxborough for provision by Littleton of LCTV services to Boxborough for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, for $60,500 with supplemental services at $90 per hour.
Second?
Okay, motions, that was a tie, I don't know how you're gonna call that one, Anthony, but they both seconded it.
I'm gonna go with Joe.
Okay, all right.
Wise choice.
Motion's made and seconded, any further? All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, the ayes have it. All right, going to replace Chief Bernard, Chief Wodzinski, and Bonnie. So he must feel he's in trouble if he's got Bonnie with him.
Bring it back.
Well, you want to bring your accountant to the audit.
Right. Okay, and again, a couple of topics here, both relative to the Advanced Life Support Program that we've embraced, implementation update, and intermunicipal agreements.
Do you want to operate the share screen? Let me see if I can make sure it works. Okay, there you go, bottom one.
All right, so just for a brief review on the ALS implementation program. As you can see on the timeline here, we've kind of lined it up from going from April through July. We've sent out our mutual aid agreements for comment and review, which some of them have been slightly adjusted and modified. Those are with you tonight for signatures. The few of the medics are currently in the Fire Academy. They'll be graduating in July. We've submitted our application to the state, and we've received confirmation that they have them in hand and are in the process of reviewing them. Also, the ambulances have both been retrofitted. They went down to New England Fire Apparatus in Connecticut and had a few slight modifications done for a locking cabinet, just for security purposes in the rigs. We'll be doing some ALS, BLS interface training between everybody within the next 2 weeks. And on June 1st, we did our software changeover. So we actually have begun the breakaway from Pro, and we've realigned with Essex County Fire Chiefs Association. We were able to do that and save a significant amount of money. Staying within another district program for our PCR software.
We just all have to move to Essex County.
So that's a pretty good system for us. Westford is also on that. So we actually were able to keep the same software that we're using right now and just basically have a seamless transfer over to the new group. We're anticipating the state inspection in June. Typically, since they've already received our packets, if there were issues, they're typically right back and in contact, and we haven't had that, so everyone is telling us that that's a good sign. So we're looking forward to hearing from them to get our final inspection going. Once the inspection's complete, then we'll be able to actually obtain our medications and stock the ambulances for a start time of roughly July 1st or the first week of. There you go. Oh, too many. Same thing with this chart, it just kind of breaks it out a little bit more, January through July. And it highlights the items that have been completed and the items that we're still waiting for. It's basically the same timeline that we just went over, just in a little simpler format to understand. Looking at some of our history, this is per calendar year, not fiscal year. Looking at our run volume, this current year, we are about 150 over last year where we were at this time. It doesn't, quite reflect that on this because of the calendar year. And as well as some projected revenues, and as well as revenues from the past years.
Nature of the calls change much or not?
We're majority are medical over the fire. A lot of motor vehicle accidents, but it's definitely more fire, more medical over fire.
More medical at the home or more medical on the highway, or?
Probably more medical at home at different points in town. Nothing more over one over the other.
Yeah.
So what we did here, we took last year's run volume and we actually gave it to our billing company that we're going to be going with. We're going to be going with Coastal. And we asked them to look at our current rates and their billing procedures, and just to kind of give us a rough calculation of our revenues and what we could potentially be looking at coming in. Last year we brought in just over 400,000. They have a much higher collection rate, and they will pursue things much differently than the way Pro did. And we also had, there were some fees that weren't necessarily clear. So looking at last year's numbers, run volume, with our current day's revenue, they were estimating at about $718,803. Again, this is kind of conservative.
Compared to the 416 that we actually realized.
Yes. And again, this is conservative. We don't have mileage added in. We don't have ALS2 calls. So ALS is basically broken up into a couple different levels, ALS1 and ALS2, which that's more of the trauma aspect and things like that. So we tried to stay a little bit conservative.
How do the percents paid on invoices, what's the basis of that percent paid on invoice? I guess, is that Coastal's experience? Is that an industry-based number? Is that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I believe it's a Coastal. There is a percentage of write-offs every year that, just don't get paid. Coastal is definitely a more aggressive company, and they will pursue people and send, second requests and.
Plus Medicare and Medicaid don't pay that invoice amount.
Correct, right. So that alone is a different level. It's called a contracted rate, and that's a bit lower. On this slide, we're looking at our projected revenues that we had from last year at the current rates. And we included the cost of the medics. There's 5 medics at the 235,792, an additional medic, which is our the ALS coordinator. And those together are the 286,283, including the fringe, which comes out at the 412,248. On top of that, in analyzing dispatch, we've also gone into this and added 2 dispatchers. There's a portion of the ALS service that's called EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch, where the dispatcher will remain on the line with the patient, talking to them the whole time until the first emergency responders come on scene. So looking at that, it could tie up more time for the dispatcher.
The current system, if those haven't experienced, if you're calling for, and it requires ALS, you call forwarded to another center, correct?
Correct, that's what happens right now.
Awfully
Right now,
disconcerting if you're the one making the call, trust me.
right now, it gets shipped off to Pro. In our years, we have never received an update from them on a patient's condition prior to us arriving on a scene. This will allow our dispatchers to continue to gain information and to relay that information on to us while we're responding to the scene. So that added cost to dispatchers at $46,654, which is roughly is $93,309. With the fringe, additional $33,509, comes up to $126,900. That's all in for the dispatchers. The next line is our expenses for the ALS service, our supplies, software, QA/QI, everything like that. With the total of the $626,900 compared to the $718,800 that were estimated coming in, we still have a net operating gain of $63,151. So in the big picture, we are looking at being conservative, yet still bringing in a little bit of additional revenue on top of that with the added dispatchers in there now.
And despite all the challenges and complexities, you're ready to go live on July 1st.
It'll be roughly that first week. It's going to depend on how the state allows us to start, whether we start going in just days for the first week or two and then jump right in once the guys are out of the academy. And we'll be running around the clock, but we will be running it in some format every day.
4th of July is a busy day, you want to have the troops ready. Okay, questions, comments?
A few, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
On this estimated revenue calculation, Medicare and Medicaid are contracted rates, right?
Yes.
So more aggressive pursuit of them doesn't really change.
Correct.
Private pay, no insurance represents a tiny fraction of our estimated revenue.
Yep.
So I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is how, therefore, the only place that coastal could make up the difference, make up $300,000 worth of additional revenue brought in, is on the insurance and HMO side. Which means right now, using last year's numbers, we're collecting on the order of $100,000 out of 400 or so billed from insurance HMO. And Coastal is proposing that they can take that from 100,000 to 438,000?
We're currently only collecting BLS revenue, okay? So that ALS piece is money that we are not collecting at this time.
It goes to
So-
Pro
Okay.
EMS, and we don't see it. We don't spend the services up front, and we don't get the money in at the
Gotcha.
end.
So a number of these calls will be converted from BLS to ALS calls.
Correct. Right.
Well, the ALS component will be added into our revenue stream, where currently it doesn't even hit our town books. It goes directly to Pro, they collect it, they take their ALS revenue and send us BLS revenue.
Okay. They take that piece,
Yes.
send it on. Okay.
So that's the major driver.
I guess the reason I'm concerned is that here we say, oh, more aggressive pursuit is what we want, and as a town, that's probably true, but I'm also really concerned about overly aggressive pursuit of these bills, particularly in the private pay, no insurance sector. That is a very double-edged sword, and I don't necessarily want them to be.
I've worked
So
with
aggressive.
Pro and with Coastal in the past. The town was with Coastal up until 10 years ago when we went to the Pro EMS program. Coastal is aggressive in that they go after whatever insurance providers are available to pay.
Okay.
So in the case of an accident, if it's not an HMO situation that a private pay insurance, they'll go after auto insurance, they'll go after, homeowners insurance in those circumstances. They are obviously going to go after, whatever, they're going to bill the payers. If the payers show that they cannot pay, then they will present that back as, a non-collectible item.
Okay.
But they are much more aggressive in pursuing other insurance avenues than Pro EMS has been.
And you've had an opportunity to review their books to
We had them in the past, I've used them in a couple of other communities, and I could just see the difference in the collection ratios, so.
Surrounding communities are also using them, and that's probably one of the major differences, is that coastal will go after your primary and your secondary insurance. We did not have that type of luck with prep.
Okay. Second question I have is on the, second series of questions I have is on the budget projection side. Where in the budget projection is replacement costs for equipment, materials, essentially long-run costs? So as I understand this, the other expenses are the annual operating expenses, is that right?
So that's in the 87 and
Medications,
change.
disposables, et cetera.
Yep, that's the 87,000 and change, right on, that's on there.
Okay,
So that's those are our operating expenses.
Annual operating
Annual
costs.
operating
Okay.
expenses, yep. That'll be our, our bandages, our medications, the drugs, all of the simple things, the software, paying for the billing, paying for the QA/QI.
okay, so what I don't see in here are the capital costs, the long-run capital costs reflected in the annual budget.
So, and it's not at this point, but you can see the 63,000 that's left over as a surplus. The hope is that that would sit and accumulate to a point that over a number of years, you could purchase an ambulance from those types of revenues. But I would just remind the board that, and I don't believe that you were on the board at the time that we made the decision, the ALS program was sold as a service enhancement. It wasn't sold as a revenue enhancement program because of the time that it was taking to respond for ALS from Concord and wherever the ALS intercept might be at that time. So the timeline was getting a little tight for the chief to swallow, I believe.
On many occasions, we weren't even receiving ALS services because of the response lag. We were meeting up with them at the Rotary in Concord, and it wasn't worth the time wasted to stop at the Rotary and have them board on when we could be at the hospital and receive the same treatment. So it was well worth changing the service, offering the enhancement to the community with a much better service, much better care, allowing us the ability to take to the proper facility and not meeting up with ALS, deciding, oh no, we need to go somewhere else, we're going in the wrong direction. And basically having that care for the community in minutes.
And I'm more than comfortable
And-
making that argument.
Yep.
My concern is that the real cost isn't reflected here. And it's one thing to say to the community, this costs not just the users of the service, but it costs the community $200,000 a year. We can make that argument, but I'd like to see real costs rather than just the annual operating costs that don't reflect that capital, because that's what the program itself actually costs. And the fact that a portion of that may be funded out of the town budget is fine, because it is a service that we are providing outside of the revenue it generates. That's not my issue. My issue is that I want to make sure we're looking at the holistic number.
And, on top of this, it's going to take our first full year to be able to look at it and look at our actual revenues coming in. Right now, we're going off of projections, and we're trying to be very conservative off of them. Not run it, we can estimate those and go by the best projections, as well as talking to our neighboring communities, and really trying to use realistic numbers. Coastal even used our bill payers just to analyze their rates, what they were paid, for what percentage of calls. So, again, we tried to be conservative with it and really looking at it. But after the
And
first
with
year,
that-
we'll have a much better number.
With the conservative aspect of it, I mean, essentially, you've got a 10% contingency built in here, which is not an unreasonable contingency, but what we're sort of double counting that contingency. The one part of that is saying, well, we're being conservative, we don't exactly know, and then the other answer is, well, we're looking at using that, what right now amounts as a 10% contingency for some of those capital things down the road. So that's part of what makes me anxious about adding in almost $100,000 here, more than $100,000 with dispatcher costs.
I would say that I think that's an important, correct line of questioning, but the chief did make us aware of this, and Bonnie too, right from the start, that for at least a year of operation, there would be certain unknowables. And,
Oh,
you know,
I-
and then there's a transition as well, that we do have a capital plan in place for the department as a whole, and it's just trying to find the sweet spot of to what extent the revenues for this program will allow us to fund part of that capital plan out of this revenue stream, and how much the town's gonna carry on its, you know, existing funding networks. I mean, I think it's appropriate to monitor that, but I think if they were to give us numbers, hard numbers on that front, there'd probably be guesswork. And,
I mean, to the extent that all of this is.
a lot of it's guesswork,
guesswork.
right, well.
I mean, it's-
It is, but it's also, it's our best strategy to make sure that the service is provided to people in Littleton, because we were really behind the eight ball where the service was not getting provided to our satisfaction. Not only did it take them a long time to get here, that was if they came at all.
And it's very difficult. We're the end of the line for that whole district. We are the farthest point from their response, and a majority of their responses were coming from Lincoln. It's just not acceptable. Right now, we'll also we have mutual aid agreements with Westford and Air. We will be ALS backup for them as they will be for us.
Which wouldn't have been entirely possible if we weren't also ALS providers?
That's correct.
Sort of a quid pro quo there.
Yeah,
And that's-
there's just too much ALS, request for ALS in our community for either one of their towns to assume that full role.
Yeah, so I'd say, let's not lose sight of, as of sometime in early July, we'll be able to provide in-house, you know, the benefits of a long thought-out program, and part of it is still gonna be trial and error.
And in part, but the other part of the dynamic was that when Acton, which was in our Pro EMS group,
Yes.
decided to provide the service on their own, there was no other reason for, you know, the equipment could make sure that it comes this way, but it didn't,
Right,
It
with us and
didn't
acting out
make
of
it,
that
yeah.
now, there's no need for them to be on this side of the district.
Right.
Um,
You'll update us periodically, we'll ask you to,
Absolutely.
you'll do it without being asked, but
We have-
we'll monitor that.
The whole graph in system is set up right now where we've already begun monitoring our expenses and our costs for all of this. Fortunately, we are under budget from what we originally anticipated at this point, and that is filled in on a monthly basis.
And we should, by the time we begin our next year's annual budget cycle, we'll have about 6 months of experience in place too, 4 to 6 months or so.
And furthermore, I mean, this discussion isn't even particularly germane to the motion in front of us, or ultimately what you're
Well,
asking
yeah, it
for
was-
tonight. But I did want to go through that because it will come up, you know, as we go through this, as we learn what the numbers look like and what the projections are.
All important. And actually, that particular item didn't request a motion, did it? It's the
It's the very-
intermunicipal agreements that do.
yeah, it's the very next item that has,
All right, do you want to speak to that piece of it, Chief, or is it pretty much?
So this, right now, you'd be signing all of the agreements with our neighboring communities for, basically, it's a fixed rate for ALS services that is common throughout the district, from town to town. We will, OEMS needs a signed version that does show that we are providing this service to our neighboring communities as well.
Any questions on this particular item, but also in general, anything that's wasn't covered, or, you know, anybody wants further explanation on the ALS program? Okay, all right, Madam Clerk?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize execution of intermunicipal agreements with the towns of Acton, Air, Boxborough, Groton, Harvard, and Westford to provide reciprocal backup for ALS Advanced Life Support Services beginning on July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2020, and automatically renewing for subsequent one-year periods for a maximum of 23 years.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Bonnie? All right, public input. So we're Anyone in the public who wants to address a topic that's pointedly not one of our agenda topics, if you have anything stray, curveball you want to throw us, here's your chance. All right, once, twice, sold, all right, good. And board updates, I'll go around and see what board members have for updates. Mr. Knox?
I just, a couple things to keep it quick. Most of us were able to go to the changing of the guard, if that's what you want to say. What day was it?
Friday.
Friday that we, Chief King had his last day and had a nice ceremony without having to say a word. It was nicely done as he walked out of the police station and amongst all the officers and into a car and drove away. And shortly after our acting chief was sworn in, so I'll stop there because other people might want to make comments about that. When the governor came for the Ready Mix ribbon cutting, I think one of the most amazing parts that I can see is that situation in that part of town has sat that way for a long time. Since I was a kid, it was Sandville. They went and built the Ready Mix new plant on the same footprint that was there 50, 60 years ago. And it works out great. That's what it was there for before. It's a brand new service, and I'm glad they're up and running. The last thing I want to mention too is that third Thursday is on the 21st. I know that many booths with many different interests, but I want to mention that the Littleton Business Association is going to sponsor a Littleton Common Improvement booth where they'll have questions and answers for on the sewer program. They'll have people there that can answer any questions that you might have. And I'll stop there. Because I want City to take care of the Girl Scout thing that I went to too.
Okay.
Well, just to make sure that Chase doesn't trump her on that, I'll go to Cindy next.
So Joe and I had the pleasure and honor to attend the Girl Scout Gold Award ceremony. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago now? What an incredible event to attend. I'm so impressed with the whole Girl Scout program. I was a Girl Scout myself here in Littleton. But just the accomplishments of the three girls that won the award, the hard work and dedication they put into it. I'd like to congratulate Olivia Rosenblum, was one of the award recipients, and she did a program on literacy, raising awareness about literacy by creating a little free library at the elementary schools. And I think she also had it at the Castle in the Trees at one point as well. The second recipient was Christina Monterez, and she created this whole mechanism to assist people if they lose their pet, who to contact, what channels to go through, and she created this whole networking system to help people find a lost pet. And the other recipient was Nicole Banjoni. She created an event called Every 15 Minutes, and she educated her peers on the dangers of distracted and impaired driving and the consequences of that. To the point, at one point in the school, they they pulled a kid out of class every 15 minutes just to depict the reality of losing a classmate every 15 minutes for the consequence of that. So the girls, they put in a lot of hard work and dedication to achieve that award, and they couldn't have done it without their mentor and leader, Gloria Rios Moneras. I would be mistaken if we didn't mention her. She actually mentored those girls since they were little. They've been together with her. So I wanted to just give a special mention and thank you to her and all the Girl Scout leaders, because it really is an incredible program that they offer to our community, teaching these girls leadership skills and how to identify an issue in the community and formulate a solution to address that issue. They're teaching them wonderful life skills, so I want to commend everybody on their efforts with that. The only other thing I wanted to mention was the Memorial Day Parade. That was, thank you to everybody who came out and watched the parade, who also participated. We actually had some residents offered to drive veterans who are unable to walk the route this year. So I wanted to thank Ed Franzek, Rich Watson, and Keith Woods. And I know there was others that I'm missing, but I wanted to thank them for donating their time and their vehicle to drive the veterans, because that really meant a lot to them.
Nick Warcall drove the Jeep that my dad was
Okay,
in, too,
all right,
so.
thanks, Paul. And finally, I just wanted to give a mention to Jake Kivlin, class of 2018, who has joined the U.S. Marine Corps and actually left today for boot camp. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to Jake, and that we all, as a community, wish him well and congratulate him for serving our country. And that's it.
Thank you. Chase?
Just one thing, I wanted to call attention to this coming June 19th at 7 o'clock. Sudbury Valley Trustees is hosting a walk of the Smith property, which is off of Whitcomb. Sudbury Valley Trustees is working with the Littleton Conservation Trust to raise, they need about $100,000 to purchase this property, and it's right along Beaver Brook. It's really a beautiful piece of property, and they have until, my understanding is, about the end of the year to raise that $180,000 or so that they need to purchase, I could probably find it here, but 49 acres, according to Sudbury Valley Trustees. So not only are they hosting the walk on June 19th, they're also hosting one on August 4th, and I'm sure that they would love your support to raise the money they need to permanently preserve this land. So avail yourselves of the opportunity to go out there with someone from SVT to take a look at the property.
Thank you. I'd make note that while we met last week with a goal-setting session, it wasn't one of our regular meetings, so we didn't do this exercise of members' updates. So I've got about 2 to 3 weeks worth of things. It's just amazing. I don't know if it's this time of year or what it is, but so many of the activities over the past couple of weeks that the board has either participated in or been invited to took place outdoors. And the fire department opening, Memorial Day, which Cindy mentioned, followed up by the ceremony at the cookout at the VFW. The MBTA increased the shuttle run program there at the train station. Graduation last week, 2 site walks of conservation properties. The Cloverdale and the Yap properties. This morning, the Master Plan Implementation Committee and our consultants did a walk of the common area identifying properties, the outdoor ceremony at the police station. And that's just, a couple of weeks' time in Littleton, and there's so many instances of the community coming together and a community well put together to provide it. It's just great, and that doesn't even include the ones we didn't get to. I didn't get to the Eagle Scout ceremony, the Boosters comedy night, whatever else, a lot out there. So it's just a good time of year to remind some board members as they recharge their batteries that we got a great town to work for. I've got a few other updates that are more for the board, in-house stuff, so I won't bore the crowd on that. I'll address them at the end of the meeting. Because there are some folks here who have been very good and polite as they apply for positions on boards, and we don't want them to change their minds before they are sworn in, so we want to get that done quickly. We have a number of positions. A lot of them are reappointments, and it's pretty well organized by Keith, and I would guess that means by Diane Dickerson as well, so that we can move through this. We don't have a complete board, so we don't have to do it this way, but I'd suggest if there's any wild, hot disagreement over some position, we just put it off to our second session at this, which would be the June 25th. And we'll try to move through as many of these boards as possible. As I say, a lot of them are reappointments. We'll give everybody a shot to come forward and tell us why you are interested in the board that you're applying for, or if you're on the board already, what you've been doing there that might be of interest to us. And also, I think it's worth noting at this time that at last week's goal setting, one of the items that Selectman Napoli had brought up is relevant to the way that our appointed boards conduct themselves and trying to keep them in compliance with state law. You might think you're doing something innocent and helpful, but you're signing yourself up sometimes for legal requirements, and we want to make sure there's accountabilities both ways and make sure that town hall helps you do your job right and that your committees function as effectively as they can. So more about that later, but do know that this board is mindful that we're going to try to do what we can to make these boards successful in their mission. With that, I would ask Keith maybe to walk us through these boards in order.
Sure. Starting with the Conservation Commission, we have three members, full members, who are seeking reappointment for three-year terms. We also have a request from the Conservation Commission for the Board of Selectmen to approve their appointment of a non-voting associate member. So all four of those applicants are listed in your town board
Okay.
summary sheet, but we have Carl, James, and Julia seeking reappointment as full members, and Matthew as an associate member.
Okay, so Matthew Cahill, is that a new appointment?
That's new.
He's new, and he would be an associate applicant, okay. So, at a minimum, folks, if I call your name, please stand up, and if you'd like to come forward and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing. We know a lot of you folks well. We just saw you out in the field last week. Carl Melberg, Jim Pickard, and Julie Rupp. Just so the public knows who you're at, who you are, and
Carl's on it.
Carl, okay, great. Anything you wanted to say, you're welcome to come forward, or however you want to do it.
I've served on the board, I think, for about 37 years now. I've been chairman for a number of years, I don't know exactly how long.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the large landowners in the town of Littleton, and I just kind of felt that somebody should stay in touch with that.
Okay, great. Julie's a newer member of the commission.
Yeah, so I've been a member of the Conservation Commission for a year, and I'd like to, and this will continue, I've enjoyed working with developers, stakeholders, and I've also started getting involved in the Mill Pond Restoration Project, and I'd like to continue involvement with that.
Okay, and they're modest also in what else they bring to the table, because Jim is one of Littleton's most prominent working farmers, and Julie's background is in, let me see if I can find it here, you're engineering, correct? Could you maybe?
Geology.
Geology, okay. And Carl, who is not here, works at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with a BS in forestry. And is Matthew Cahill here? No, good. We'll grill you, we were too nice to them. Right, yeah. Yeah, you can take a seat if you'd like, actually.
This is fine.
Okay, make it like court, right?
Thanks for having me. I've been in town for about 5 years now, and I've seen a lot of change just in those past 5 years. So I always tell my wife about it, and she says, well, go tell someone else, go do something about it. So,
Get out of the house.
I get interested in the Conservation Commission, and the commissioners were nice enough to have me sit in the last meeting and told me about the associate position. I'm a forester, New York State College of Forestry. This is my background, natural resources management, and I work for the Department of Conservation and Recreation as an urban forester. So I predominantly work in the gateway cities in the Commonwealth, reforestation, but we see a lot of both, tree planting, try and promote the urban forest that way, and then also tree retention. So I kind of see both sides of the coin when it comes to our land. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm just hoping that I could sit in as an associate member and learn as much as possible from all the experience that's out there and contribute where I can.
Okay, terrific. Board members have any questions for Matthew, or actually for any of our other reappointment candidates?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Comments? No? Okay. Terrific. Keith, are we gonna try to go for a package vote at the end, or do we?
I suggest you take a vote on each board.
Each one, okay.
Yeah, so you
All
can
right.
vote to.
As much as I was trying to build suspense, we actually have no contest here. We have three people going for three spots, and the associate unopposed as well. So With that, I would thank you, Mr. Cahill, and
The number of roses we have is equal to the number of candidates.
that's right, yeah. So, Madam Clerk, if you wouldn't mind making a motion that helps us fill those Conservation Commission positions?
Sure. So move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint James Pickard and Julia Roop and Matthew Cahill. Should I include Matthew with that? Yeah.
And Carl Melber.
Carl
And
Melber.
Carl Melberg, to a term on the Conservation Commission for a term expiring on June 30th, 2021.
With
And Matthew's
Matthews
position
as
as
a non-voting
associate.
associate member.
Okay.
Right.
Second that.
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded then to make the appointments to the Conservation Commission. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Don't forget to get sworn in by the town clerk, correct, Keith?
That's correct.
That's correct. It's not official until you get sworn in. All right.
Thank you.
Move on. You want to try to put a chair there so we can let up to, make him sweat.
They have 7 days to get sworn in. I think they have 7 days to get sworn in.
Really?
That
I
was just a chairman.
didn't know there was a
I
shot
think there's
clock.
a shot clock on it. I'm pretty sure.
So next is
You
council.
you were, the
Sorry?
the city says they have 7
I
days.
think
to
it's
get
7 days to get sworn in.
7.
You get
They
sworn
have
in.
7 days to get sworn in from the date of appointment, I believe.
Well, the terms expire, for the sitting members, their current terms don't expire until June 30.
Right,
Okay.
so,
So-
yeah.
So, okay.
So they're all set, but Matthew should get sworn in before he sits at the next meeting.
Right.
Really digging into the rules and regs, haven't you? God bless you. All right. Council on Aging, Keith, you want to set this one up for us?
Council on Aging, I would ask that you call on Chairman Marge Payne to report on the recommendations that
Okay.
have been made by the COA at their meeting this afternoon.
All right, Marge, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well.
Good. We did have our monthly meeting today, and I think as your documents show, we have four people.
Four applicants.
Four
for
applicants
three
for 3 positions. 3 of the positions are, applicants are incumbents, and we have a 4th person, Dr. Michaels, who is here tonight, and we met with him this afternoon. So the board did vote to recommend to the selectmen that the incumbents be reappointed. However, they did ask me to please speak to you because we all are very impressed with Dr. Michaels. And we talked quite openly to him, and he can express himself to you, obviously, since he's here. And I'm glad to see that he is here.
Okay.
We're very impressed with his credentials. He's been hiding in town for a while, we found out, and we could use him. If you look at his application, he has a background in gerontology, and so be very helpful, and he's, we don't want to discourage him from
Right.
becoming involved, but he can speak for himself.
Okay.
But the actual vote of the board was to recommend to you that the incumbents be reappointed. And I also need to just convey to you that Maureen Donnelly, one of the incumbents, could not be here. She had a commitment she made several months ago for tonight, and she asked me to express her apologies.
Okay, since you are one of the applicants, I guess I would ask you to make your own pitch too on your background, what your service, yeah.
Well, actually, I became involved because I, too, worked in gerontology as an occupational therapist for many years, and in mental health also. And I have served the COA for 6 years. I'm very vested in a couple of things. One is to help our new director get her, wings under her, so to speak. And I feel that I have, the experience that might be helpful to her in that way, in regard at least. And the board just actually voted me in as chair again today, so for the next year. The other thing is that I'm also very vested in the housing and the space issues that we're all facing right now for seniors. So I really would enjoy being given the opportunity to continue working on that for a while, so.
Now, if Maureen's not here tonight, do you feel comfortable speaking on her behalf? I believe we appointed her, was it just last year? Was it-
Yes, and I will say, yes, and she is, she's been very active. She is the current chair of our awareness subcommittee, and she's been working along with Mary Picard, who is here tonight also, and she is the secretary of that subcommittee, and that was one of the reasons that I never could seem to get that subcommittee up, and that's the group that needs to be helping to get the word out about the needs of seniors and everything in town. So we have a great beginning in place, and they've been doing a great job becoming more active, so.
And she's a retired nurse.
And Maureen is a retired nurse. She also just today volunteered to be our representative on the Affordable Housing Board of Trustees.
Right.
Trust, am
That's
I
right,
saying that
Affordable
right?
Housing Trust, yeah.
That trust, she is going to be the COA representative, given being
Pro-
reappointed.
right, provided
So,
that she's
yes,
reappointed.
if she's reappointed. So, yes.
All right.
So,
How would the board prefer I do it? Interview each of the candidates and then allow you to ask questions, or would you like to ask them along the way? Since we do have a
Yeah, we can-
contest here.
Right.
Well, why don't we have everybody give their introductions and
Yeah.
then see if questions come up. But
Right.
Thank you, Marge.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'd say.
I'll ask Mary to come forward, please. Hello. And, well, you heard the drill. We just want to know, how long you been on, what your background is?
This is my second year.
Yeah.
When I retired, I thought I wanted to get into politics of Littleton. And I've found it fascinating. I really enjoy working with the council. I am on 2 subcommittees and also on the board. And having been born here, I've seen a lot of things happening, and there are some things that I wish didn't happen, but we can't always have everything that we want in this town. But I just want to continue helping my town along. Any questions?
Anything either in your background or your current work on the committee that you want to highlight?
Well, I was a nurse for 40 years, and I've dealt with the elderly, and I've dealt with the unelderly, so I know a little bit about all of them, and I have a concern for them.
Mary also sat on that committee that was hired, that selected Liz to
Oh,
approve you as
okay.
the director.
Okay, thank you. I guess the way we're going to do it, we'll give Dr. Michelson a chance to introduce himself, and then we'll see if we have any questions and see how we can get out of this mess. 4 good candidates for 3 spots. Hate it. Hello, Doctor.
Hello. Good evening, all of you. So, I'm coming to my 10th year in Littleton, and I've seen quite a few things happen in town. I've been in meetings. Some of the things I agree, some I don't agree with, and I felt that I should get involved, and I felt that I would be more effective in the Council of Aging based on my background. I'm a physician. I'm also trained in gerontology at a master's level. I have an MBA degree, and I'm also a certified mental health therapist. So I felt that I could give help and direction in terms of lending my thoughts and knowledge through policy decisions and things going around in town. I don't plan on moving anywhere else. I have aged parents. I've seen people age, and I believe that people should age in their homes and on their feet, and not in someone else's money-making facility or on their backs in nursing homes. So when these opportunities came along, I felt I should get involved. But having attended the meeting today, I noticed that it was well thought out. A lot of the points were discussed in depth. But I do believe I have time commitments. I hold a full-time job, I have young children, and I think that, and as some of the members pointed out, their meetings are held in the daytime on the busiest day of the week.
They don't have to be, though.
On the busiest day of the week on Monday, so they felt that I could help the town in some other capacity, and I agree. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I'll ask other members first. I've got thoughts, but I'll go around Cindy.
Right, well, I mean, your resume is certainly impressive. I love your philosophy about aging in place. I think that fully aligns with the way the seniors feel, and I know the way the Director of the Council on Aging feels. Absolutely, you know, I have worked a little bit with the Council on Aging, and we refer to seniors, you know, not your average senior. It's not, a lot of people don't realize that how active senior citizens are now compared to, you know, my grandparents, for example. So your philosophy definitely aligns with the philosophy, I believe, the Council on Aging and the Board of the Council on Aging. Your resume is incredibly impressive. I would love to find something for you to do in town to contribute to the boards in some capacity, because you're certainly qualified. Fully appreciate the time restraints. Understandably, it's hard to get to a board meeting in the middle of the day, but hopefully we can put our heads together and think of something.
Chase?
My primary concern is that if we don't appoint you to a spot on the COA, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose your willingness to engage and provide us your expertise, because between what I see on paper and then meeting you in person and just how well spoken you are. And we're getting nods, you can't see them, but behind you, nods from your co-applicants. So thank you so much for your willingness to both participate, lend your expertise to a community that very much needs your expertise. I don't have any particular questions.
We
It
can
speaks
always
for itself.
revisit if as further discussion warrants. Any questions? Feel free. Joe?
I just echo what my colleagues have said. I'm so happy that we made that application, and to have those qualifications, as Chase said, that we hate to see him lose them, and you lose interest in participating in town in some fashion. It is tough the way the meetings are set up right now, so.
Right.
Yeah, I would voice that too. I know it's a convenience for the present population, but we really should give mind to whether or not we're preventing people from serving, you know, by having it in the day. There's got to be a way of accommodating folks who, you know, are professionally active and not available during the day. And Doctor, I'll tell you, you were saying, well, your philosophy is what I'm living it every day, and I believe it. You know, aging in place, keeping people at home and on their feet is so important. Your expertise, I don't know how we find a way to do this. I mean, without talking to the individuals, it's impossible, but the other three applicants include, you know, Chair who's only been on 6 years, but it's been a very productive 6 years, and we're right in the position of bringing a new director up to speed. And we've got two other members who've only been on for 1 and 2 years, and in their individual terms have been actively involved just in the things we want them to be involved. One in the hiring process, and the other in increasing awareness of the program's you know, offering. So it's not easy to pick someone, you know, amongst it, say, oh, well, we need Dr. Michael's on there, so therefore push candidate X out. That's not an easy, that doesn't present itself easy here. So I'm at a little bit of a loss here. I'm getting folks in the audience who are offering input, so I'm not above seeking advice from the crowd. I may live to regret those words, but is that what Jim Pickett?
I was just wondering, what about an associate?
Or a special advisor.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's all, it can all be done, but, I mean, those positions don't currently exist. We could do something like that, I suppose, but Marge, you were on there right
I
now.
just wanted to excuse me, but Dr. Michaels, we talked to him today about that and saying that we really didn't want to lose him either. And I asked him point blank if it would be all right, for example, for our director to call him and talk to him, and maybe the two of them could work out some way that, you know, he could be, his services could be utilized. Whether it's, I don't know what it would be, but Liz was not at our meeting today, so she didn't have the opportunity to meet him. And I think that would be helpful for them to connect at some point. Certainly, he's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
So, that
Cheryl?
was just one thought.
Okay.
We did bring that up.
Thank you.
No, my suggestion was the same, appoint him as a special advisor.
Yeah. Well, you've heard suggestions. I'm not advocating any of that, because I think, you know, there is a distinction between being a duly appointed and voting member of a committee, and that if that's what you're seeking, then you have every right to, and you're certainly qualified. I don't know, does the board have a problem making this our first boot to the next meeting, and maybe we could see what pearls of wisdom come up from either our missing member Chuck or from any thought over the next couple of weeks, or I'm open to motions, whatever the
I don't have
board
any
wants.
problem moving it with the understanding that the applicants don't necessarily.
You don't have to come, there's probably nothing more we need to press you on. You're welcome to come, but,
Well, maybe if we talk to Liz and talk to Marge a little bit more about it, we can figure out what exactly is going on with the board currently that maybe in the way Dr. Michaels can assist outside of the regular scheduled board
well,
meetings.
that is one option, but I mean, I'm still not dissuaded that he shouldn't have one of the three seats that's.
Oh,
up to-
yeah, no, yeah, I agree with that as well.
And, I don't know, do you mind, Joe, deferring on that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
It's important enough, and I hope you realize that's why I think we want to take time to think about it and further get input from you folks, and it would just be our next meeting, 2 weeks' time. We promise we'll resolve it then, and it's a good kind of problem to have.
This is true.
Yeah. So I don't know what you were expecting tonight, Doctor, but you live to fight another day.
Nothing in particular.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you, Doctor. Thank you all, to all the applicants.
We have his contact information.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Another Profile and Courage Award up here. Okay, moving on to the Finance Committee, Keith. Yeah.
One applicant for one position.
Can we move that one off, too?
Two applicants?
Did you have a second one? Yeah.
Two
I
applicants.
don't think so. Well, here's what our record shows, Greg, that people up this year are Betsy Bowling, who's a school committee appointee, Tom Perrell, who's a moderator appointee, and yourself, appointed by us.
Correct.
Okay, so,
And it's my understanding that Betsy's been reappointed, and so is Tom.
okay, but we do have two applicants, or, well, one gentleman, Mr. Pellegrino, has actually shown interest in a number of committees, and we'll speak with both of you, obviously, and since you're right there, Greg, do you want to start off by reminding folks who you are and why you're up for another,
Pleasure.
yeah.
Well, Greg Champney, I've served on the Finance Committee for 3 years. I've served on the Board of Selectmen. I've been in your shoes. Been on Planning Board. I've been on Finance Planning Board. Let's see, what else? Park and Rec, CPC, Economic Development, quite a few different boards over the years. I have an MBA, focused on leadership. My undergrad was from Franklin Pierce, was for business management with a minor in finance. Had a great year this year. As being chair, as you know, Article 4 passed without a single hold. I think that sends a pretty strong message to the town and the boards that we work well together. We work well with the selectmen, we work well with the school committee and other boards. And for us to be able to get that passed without any holds, I've never seen that happen. So I think that the town trusts us, and the chemistry that we have on our board now, it's a pretty mixed group. We've served on that board. And we do work well together. We have different opinions. We're civil about it, and we're able to have, it's actually one of the best boards I've worked with, as far as being able to debate things, discuss things, and reach conclusions. So I'm up for another term. I'm interested in doing it, and want to try to lend a hand where I can.
Okay, great. Mr. Pellegrino, would you mind, whatever your preference is, staying there or moving forward? We haven't met you yet in a formal context, so.
Here, it's probably just easier rather than climbing over everybody.
Okay, sure. Please introduce yourself to us.
My name's Nick. My fiance and I moved to the town a year ago. We live over on Manchester Drive. I'm in the same boat as the gentleman in the Conservation Committee. I always said to my fiance I wanted to get involved. She finally said, all right, Nick, go get involved. So I applied for the Finance Committee along with a few others. I'm a paralegal. I work for a telecom company in Billerica in their compliance department. I'm happy to answer any questions everybody has.
Okay. I will ask board members whether they have questions for either of our two candidates first, or comments. Chase?
Quick question for Mr. Pellegrino. Would you mind to go into your sort of background a little bit more, educational background and whatnot? If you submitted a resume with your applications, it didn't make its way
Yeah, I
to
think there was
this
something wrong
package.
because it also gave my old college email address.
Okay.
I haven't had that for almost 10 years. I don't know why I did that.
So we shouldn't email you there.
Yeah, I apologize. Either I clicked something wrong or something happened on my computer. I graduated from 2010 from St. Anselm College with a degree in history. I did a year of law school, but I left. I found that I didn't particularly care for it. So I changed to Suffolk University's paralegal certificate program, which is ABA accredited. And then after that, I joined the workforce.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Joe, any questions for?
Not right now.
Cindy?
No.
Okay. Nick, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. To what level have you participated or observed the Finance Committee or other boards that you've applied for in the time that you've been in town? Have you got a chance to see how they work or how the process works?
Unfortunately, I haven't. I've only been to the general town meetings, but I've been to all of those since we moved in.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll ask board members for their direction, but do know again that Mr. Pellegrino has expressed interest and willingness to serve on a few other commissions, which we have the opportunity to appoint him to, should we not decide to appoint him here. So, does any board member want to make a motion, or is there further discussion warranted? Cindy?
I don't think there's any need for further discussion. I just, I favor Mr. Chamney only because of, the excellent chemistry and working relationship between the boards, his commitment and experience currently on the Finance Committee. I would favor his appointment.
And I share Cindy's opinion, while at the same time, I think we'll have an opportunity to revisit Mr. Pellegrino's
Right.
application, but very much same sort of as Dr. Michael, really appreciate your willingness to get him.
Don't leave empty, don't leave early, you might not be empty-handed. Joe?
No, I agree with all comments made. Greg and I have worked together for a number of years, great deal of trust in what he's done in the past and what he's done with the Finance Committee, so that's the direction I'm going.
I've had the opportunity to work with, on the same committee or in, across the table with Greg on a number of those committees he's been on, and if the reputation of town government in Littleton is that it's friendly and welcoming, he's the sort of fellow that makes that true. And, yeah.
Because he asks us hard questions, so.
No, I don't mind. So I would, if someone want to convert those comments into a motion?
Sure. Can I just double check on the expiration date on this? It says with a term expiration of June 30th, 2018?
That's the current term.
It's current
Right.
term, so it would be 2021 is.
Yeah, go back to the original motion
Just
page.
double checking on that. Okay. Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Greg Champney to a term on the Finance Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2021.
Second?
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Greg. All
Oh,
right.
sorry.
Keith?
Next
What
is
MPIC.
Master Plan Implementation Committee. This is a joint appointment made by the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen. The Planning Board voted at their last meeting to appoint Megan Diane Ford and Lyle Webster, who are the two applicants that you have in front of you.
And the chair, Mike Zeldin, maybe you can, Mike, speak to a little bit of, there's a shuffle going on here. A couple appointments will be made tonight and perhaps more later. You want to speak to who's leaving the committee and how things are moving internally?
Yes, I'm Michael Zeldin, Chairman of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. The term of Gary Lacroix, who's been a very productive member, is ending, and he's moving on to other things, including hopefully work on transportation in town. So he's not going to be reapplying this year for work on the Implementation Committee. The nature of our work is also changing, shifting in pace and demand. So the other very glad news is that we're also technically losing another member, namely Mark Montanari, who's leaving his assigned position as a member of as a representative on our board from the planning board. He is going back to the planning board, I would say full-time, serving there as chairman, so it seems to be a good idea for him to open up the space on the implementation committee, given the responsibilities of both boards. So in that connection, we have an opening, and that opening has been filled by Ms. Anna Houston, who has been serving as vice chair for a number of, since frankly, the master plan was almost born. And she has been serving as vice chair, and she will continue in that capacity, I'm glad to hear, by agreement with the planning board. However, with her taking over the position of Mark Montanari, I hope everyone's following this very carefully, we have two openings. And I'm very pleased that the two openings have been applied for by two candidates, each bringing unique skills much needed by the town, and therefore much needed by our particular committee, which covers 67 priorities that have been, shall we say, considered very important by the town. We need all the help we can get. And so I've already submitted to you a letter describing the qualifications of each of these. They each bring unique talents. One of them, for example, Lyle Webster is an architect and is in business, so he acted with a very good feel for design, cost, and concern, which is one of the major things the Implementation Committee is concerned about. Ms. Megan Form has been not a resident of this town, but a leader in trying to bring infrastructure changes much needed to this town, and has spoken bravely, frequently, and with, shall we say, to the point. On many occasions, she's one of the resident experts in what can and cannot work in this town. So I hope both applicants meet your approval and that you so vote.
Do they get to speak for themselves too, Mike?
No, not on my committee.
At least he's self-aware, right?
And it didn't make this edition, but I am likewise going to follow Mark Montanari's move, and I'll be looking to rotate off as the selectman appointee, and I'd spoken a while back with Chase about doing that. We have a lot of the portfolio he carries is similar to the mission of the master plan committee, so perhaps we'll do that for the next meeting. Do it right now, you think?
Well, we have to meet on that.
Oh, yeah?
If my other selectmen will grant me the privilege, and if the master plan implementation committee will have me. It's a lot of ifs.
It's only a couple meetings a month there, Chase.
You're going to be filling some pretty big shoes.
You can vote that at your discretion, you can do it tonight.
Okay, but it will still require a confirming vote for the planning board or not? No, okay.
Planning
All right.
board made appointed Anna without.
All right, well, before we muddy the waters with that, why don't we hear from Megan and Lyle? I mean, Lyle, I'm so glad is finally someone's been able to talk him into getting involved in town government. He's always had bright things to say and great promise. And anyway, why don't we start with you, Lyle, if you want to either talk from there or here.
Sure. Happy to be from here. Thank you, Mike. As many of you likely know, my wife Gretchen was campaign manager for Anna Houston, and thereby created a void that needed to be filled, so happy to say, all right. So, coming up on 52 years on the planet, all of them here. My family's been here since before Littleton was Littleton. The home pictured on the right is our family home. The home pictured on the left is my ever-so-great-grandfather's home. So if we're trying to figure out who we're going to be in the 21st century, I suppose I'm qualified to help. I would be happy.
That's the map we want you to focus on.
I can cross the room.
Any questions for Lyle?
No.
No, good. Megan, great to see you back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yep.
Thank you for having me. So my name's Megan Ford. I live at 28 Shattuck Street, right across the street, so it's super easy for me to get here. I've been a resident for 12 years. I was most recently the chair of the Littleton Common Sewer Feasibility Study Committee and got to know town politics very well through that means. And I was having a conversation earlier this evening with my 14-year-old daughter who asked me, why do you want to do this town stuff? It seems boring. I said, actually, no, it's kind of exciting and interesting. And it got me thinking, why do I want to get back involved in this stuff? And it's really, the reason I'm really happy to be applying for this particular committee, not only the people on the committee that currently are serving, I really respect and admire, but the key word is implementation. I want to see things happen, and I think if I could be a part of that, that would be super satisfying, so.
Terrific, good. Any questions for Megan?
No.
All right. So, any questions on Chase taking the position I had held on there as a selectman appointee? Objections? All right.
You don't want to raise your hand?
No.
There's plenty of work to go around.
Doing that to me, no.
Okay, Keith, can we do the three of them as a package?
You can.
All right.
One
Cindy?
administrative question?
Yes.
Because of all this shuffling, do we have to like flip a coin and decide who gets a term that ends in 1 year and somebody gets a term that ends in another?
No, because it's,
These are
it's
open,
for
aren't
it's
they?
for indefinite terms.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Oh, so there's no expiration. Wait, yeah. Jake's like, whoa, time out.
The sheet says term ends.
I know.
You heard Jim Pickett say 37 years? Well, all right, he'll be topping that at some point.
So there's no
It
expiration.
never ends, no.
All right.
Okay.
You got 67 things to get done.
As soon as it's implemented, we'll be done.
That's good.
Work fast.
Okay, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Megan Diane Ford, Lyle Webster, and Chase Gerbig to a term on the Master Plan Implementation Committee for a term expiring
For an indefinite term.
for an indefinite term.
I did.
You sure? Yeah, for an indefinite term.
Yeah, really.
Yep.
You gonna second it?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I'm free.
I will note, though, that I believe that voters do get a say in my term.
That's-
I
yeah,
was
that's
going to say
true.
for a term expiring, never.
All right,
Thank you all.
thank you. Moving right along, Keith, what's the next committee?
Taxation Aid Committee.
All right. We have one seat up, that would be Mary Patty Hunt, and you are game for another go at it. Maybe, this is one of the committees that flies under the radar, so perhaps, Patty, you could take a moment just to explain what good work you folks do.
Yes, this is a program that provides tax relief for individuals and couples over 65 or disabled who own and occupy their home, but don't have the income and their expenses exceed their income. So we have a program using the senior circuit breaker guidelines to determine how much we're going to give them toward their taxes. Now, I've been on this committee for a couple of years, and in a way, we kind of just rubber stamp what Council of Ages.
Oh, you're not supposed to say that, come on.
But on the other hand, I have a background with Mass Health, Medicaid for the last, before I retired after 38 years as the director of the office. So I understand rules and regulations and implementation and application and needs assessment. I've been on the Council of Aging, and I'm currently the vice chair of the Council of Aging. Been on it for the last 5 years. I'm also the chair of the subcommittee for the Council of Aging, and I've worked with the planning board. Go planning board. On the Council of Aging. I'm also the chair of the Space Committee on the Council of Aging, and the liaison with the Littleton Housing Authority. So I have a lot of experience with the aging, and I'm also aged myself. So I'm very in tune to needs of the seniors. So this is a...
Just as active at St. Anne's with the elderly there as well, yeah.
Doesn't have a lot of money, so we solicit through the light and water bill once a year. We get a little note asking for contributions. We receive contributions through the Council of Aging once in a while. And we meet twice a year, and we determine based on what we have and the number of applications we receive, what individuals or couples are going to receive. Very, very, very important program.
You do good work,
It is good work.
yeah. Any comments or questions, folks?
No.
All right, I'll entertain a motion, then we don't have any opposition here.
No. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Mary Patty Hunt to a term on the Taxation Aid Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2021.
Sorry.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And moving right along, Transportation Advisory Council. There's the creator of the Transportation Advisory Council sitting front and center.
You just voted to establish this committee. It's for indefinite terms, and you had identified that in your vote, or established in your vote, that there would be one citizen at-large member.
Correct.
You have multiple applicants.
And then a number of board, the remainder of the committee is made up by board appointments, which we haven't done yet that for our board, have we? Yeah, we're going to have to do some of those assignments soon, too. But we do have 3 applicants for the one citizen-at-large spot on the Transportation Advisory Council. Aaron Alsop, Gary LaCroix, and Nick Pellegrino, who we met earlier tonight. Gary, since you're right in the front row, could I ask you to perhaps remind folks who you are and why you're interested?
Sure. Gary LaCroix, 15 Mill Road. This idea of the Transportation Advisory Council was something I championed as a member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, of which I am stepping down as of this month. And I was previously on the Master Plan Update Committee, and the idea of some kind of transportation discussion group or council group which came from the master plan, which was because we had identified a number of transportation issues that the town wrestles with on a regular basis, and they're pretty diverse between infrastructure with our roads, but also elder services and the shuttle services that we provide for those which are critical to those folks, as well as better amenities for bicycles and pedestrians. And that no entity really has oversight of each of these pieces, and if we're looking at our investments of infrastructure or investment in transportation, we should be looking at it kind of holistically as to where we think we should be putting our resources towards. And so the idea was to get the different committees and town offices that have a dog in the hunt to collectively meet periodically to discuss goals, agendas, and things they want to work on collaboratively. That's why most boards are, you have board of selectmen, planning board, bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, elder services, finance committee. I don't know if there's some others, I'm sure as well. I forget. But so when we talked about having one at-large member, and I thought, since I'm stepping down from the master plan implementation committee, and since I brought this to you guys as an idea, that I would be willing to at least get the ball rolling, because as to, what this committee could be, what the council could be.
Okay. Our next applicant, Aaron Alsop. Is Aaron here? Hello, Aaron, how are you? Good.
Hi. Just to be clear, you decided to create this committee and you're running to be on it? The most qualified guy? Am I understanding that right? Well, certainly I'm not qualified to be on it.
You're the tallest guy.
At least I get everybody to laugh. Well, I've been in the town for 8 years, and I've had some friends recently that got involved in the town, and so I said, you know what can I do? Can I get involved? Is there anything I can do? So I went to the town, website, and I'm going down the list. And, transportation. Well, I've sold cars, and I run a car dealership, so that sort of aligns a little bit, right? So,
Yeah.
but I've also, managed people, and I solve problems. I'm constantly, having to deal with, random things, and I've been involved with the construction of dealerships, and going through bids of, what people are vendors and how they're building things and that sort of thing. And I'm into cars, obviously, and that's a part of transportation. Electric cars, some of those kinds of, things and how that might be able to fit into our town. I've been thinking about how that might, integrate. And that's pretty much it for me. But you're probably the guy. I'm happy to be here. If you think that I can help him, I'd love to be involved.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Alsop at this point?
No.
Thank you. And Mr. Pellegrino, you had applied for this as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add that you didn't say previously?
Just that I was interested in this one, kind of for the same reasons. I come originally from Melrose, and they did not implement one of these committees. They kind of just, threw it by the wayside. Not that they stopped investing in infrastructure, but they didn't pay attention to it. And now that they've had so many people move into the city, essentially people can't get around. The roads are in a mess. There's too many people living there. They didn't expand the way they should have. Fire services, police services, the whole bit. So I applied for this because I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to Littleton. I don't want to see the same thing happen. So this one I actually have a very big interest in joining, obviously.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have 3 candidates, folks. What's the pleasure of the board?
Do you know what Mr. Sanders might recommend here?
What's that?
Just channeling, yeah.
Is 7 members. I think part of the reason that we had originally envisioned one community at large resident is that we weren't sure how much interest this would generate.
Right. That's true, that's a possibility. I know what you're getting at, potentially expanding the committee. But let me just get Mr. Mullen from the planning board's input.
Ed Mullen, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. When I was Chair of the Planning Board, Gary came before us from the Implementation Committee and did his presentation. At that time, my board was having discussions of our elections for next year. And I had said at that time that when I move out of the chair into another position, that I would be the volunteer as long as he signed up. So it was I told him he needed to do it in order for me, I'm in.
Is that a threat?
So I'm in. My board already appointed me.
Sucker. All right, Chase was just wandering down a path we've ventured onto before. What do you want to flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the idea would be that right now this is a 7-member board with 1 community at large resident. The fact that we have 3 applicants, all of whose input I would be interested in including into the deliberations of the committee, I would suggest that we entertain the idea of expanding it from 7 to 9 members and seeing how it proceeds with a 9-member board.
I can comment too.
Gary?
When I talked to the different boards, there was no magic number as to, the number. Some of the boards we talked about having multiple at-large positions. So this is a new idea. We have no idea how this is going to work. 9 might be untenable, 9 might be perfect. It's kind of something we're going to be fleshing out as we go along. But I think it's worth, if you have people interested, it's worth considering expanding if you guys are open to that, as long as it doesn't get too big.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's fun to play God. Throw the rules out the window. I'm okay. Yeah.
Everybody wins.
It increases the quorum requirement
Right.
from 4 to 5.
That's true.
But how many actual decision-making votes do we anticipate the Transportation Advisory
It's even, just
Committee-
even over a meeting, you need a quorum, you know. I will say this, I mean, I'm in full favor of doing that. In the past, once upon a time when we had the Economic Development Committee, we made it too big at first, and then we weren't getting a quorum, and then we found the right, you know, we altered the size back and forth a little bit over time and found what seems to be the sweet spot. So, procedurally, Keith, what should we do here? Do we need 2 votes, one to expand the membership of the committee and then one to make the appointments?
Yes, and just for those keeping score at home, the reason why we did not have the discussion regarding the Council on Aging is the Council on Aging is established by a town meeting vote
Right.
and a town bylaw, which can only, so it has X number of members, you can only change the membership by going back to town meeting and having the Attorney General of the Commonwealth approve the bylaw change.
Thank you for pointing out, this is just
For a committee, there are 2 ways you establish town boards in Littleton. One is by town meeting vote or bylaw, the other is by Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, when they make a vote to create a committee with a particular composition, they can amend that vote at any time, and which you watch how that happens on the Transportation Committee.
Right.
But it would take us a much different route for the Council on Aging. Much more.
Which we would.
Yeah, well, we went that route before because we had too many members of the Council on Aging and not enough applicants, so we reduced it. So we are living with that previous decision right now.
But that's more of a process if we wanted to address that. This is one of these committees, ad hoc committee we created, you know, as a board, so we can change it as a board.
One follow-up to that, though, is that as I read the way we set it up, the community at-large member is to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board.
We would then probably have to send these folks back for.
Recommend them to
you know,
the Congress.
Do you think that's gonna be a problem, Ed?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know, that Gary guy's a lot.
You just have to make one more stop. So why don't we deal with the first motion then, to give us the authority?
Okay.
Or
I would move that the Board of Selectmen amend the composition of the Transportation Advisory Council to include 3 community at-large residents.
Second?
Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? The ayes have it. All right, now, next motion. Madam Chair, Clerk.
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Aaron Aesop, Gary LaCroix, and Nicholas Pellegrino to the Transportation Advisory Council for a term expiring on June 30th, 2021.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Or it would be for an indefinite term.
Indefinite term.
Oh, for an indefinite term.
Okay, motion's made and seconded as clarified. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? The ayes have it. Didn't see that coming, did you? Okay. Zoning Board of Appeals. We have one full member and 2 alternate seats up this year, is that correct?
1 member and 2 alternates.
Yeah, and I did receive an email from Sherry Gould, Chair. Is she? Yeah, okay. I don't know if everyone else got that. I just, okay, all right. We do have Cheryl Hollinger, who is both a member of the board and one of the folks who's seeking reappointment, and we have a total of 4 applicants for 3 spots, but Mr. Pellegrino, you gonna make life easy for us, or?
Yep, I'm good with the transportation thing.
Taking that as a request to withdraw your name from consideration here? Okay, that's, so we have Cheryl Hollinger, who's been on the board. Well, tell us how long you've been on the board, Cheryl, and such.
I don't even know.
Right.
I was just sitting here trying to figure that out. I know it's more than 8 years. I don't think it's more than 12. I think somewhere around maybe 8 years, because maybe this is the second time I've come up for reappointments, 4 years. Would that be right? Or was it 3 years and this is the third time?
Could be.
Somewhere in there. I grew up in Littleton. I moved back here 16 years ago to raise my children. I own property in the Common. I own property over on Tavern Road. I have 3 kids. One's a sophomore in high school. I'm a real estate broker in town. I live and work in town. The interesting thing of the business of the ZBA is really to recognize legitimate need for relief from the zoning bylaws, and to recognize that legitimate need and to grant relief from those bylaws. And it's really quite complicated these days because our bylaws have been changing and our needs have been changing a lot. We have a very diverse board that actually manages to debate things very civilly, and there are some people who are very pro on building and progressing in town, and there are others that are a little bit more like me, who remembers the way it was and liked it that way, but also recognize a need. I mean, I just helped a father age in place and lost him last September, and he lived in town here until he was gone, and in his home till he was gone. But it's an interesting board. It is a board that takes a lot of experience and paying attention to the rules and reading of the rules and regulations. I've been on there long enough that I'm comfortable chairing a meeting when we have people, the people on this board tend to be the lawyers and the architects and people who frequently need to recuse themselves. So it's good to have a number of board members who can chair a meeting and control a meeting and keep an eye out for what's going on. And we have very good alternates. We have 2 alternates that are up that both of them are lovely, and I'll give a plug for them if Sherry didn't.
She did, actually. Her letter endorsed the 3. You said that your committee had not met formally, but that she felt confident in saying that the board as a whole endorsed the 3 who had applied.
We disagree frequently, but we are able to debate politely and usually come to a consensus. Occasionally the votes aren't unanimous, but they shouldn't be. And our alternates are great. We have attorney as an alternate, and
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, well, in fact, we'd like to speak or hear from both of you. I'll just take them in the order that they appear on the page I have. Kathleen O'Connor. Oh, Kitty.
Hello, yes.
Oh.
Otherwise known as Kitty. It's easier to remember. So I'm Kitty O'Connor, 11 Lillian Street. I've been on the board for the last year. Threw my hat into the ring because we were recent transplants. We're now coming up on our 5-year anniversary as Littleton residents. And full disclosure, he's my husband. So we're both involved in all these fun things. But in terms of the ZBA, especially since they were lacking members and oftentimes found themselves having to postpone things because they didn't have a quorum. So I threw my hat in the ring. I'm an attorney. My practice area happens to be estate planning and elder law. Throw that into the mix since we've been talking a lot about elders tonight. And I do real estate as part of my practice area, so I'm familiar with some of the ins and outs, etc. In fact, I represented the seller of our town's newest acquisition, which Cheryl was very instrumental in helping us acquire the Baker House over on Robinson Road. And so another learning situation with respect to working with the town. Anyway, it is a wonderful board. It is diverse. Everybody is lovely. I haven't really seen any disagreements, so maybe they predated my my going on. But Cheryl's correct. That there's
points.
Correct. That there's a lot of good detail discussion in terms of the applications that come before the board, and making sure that the board is in fact adhering to its mission, which is that exceptional relief that homeowners can bring before the board when when their case warrants it. So it's been a pleasure to serve, and I'm happy to serve another term. Not indefinite, I don't think, but.
Now, these have a expiration date, correct, Keith? These?
Yes, they do,
Yes, all right.
3-year terms.
All right, and Jillian Shaw.
So I'm Jillian Shaw. I've been a resident for over 11 years here in town. I joined last year with Kitty as well, started throwing my hat in the ring to make sure that there was enough voting members to have pulled in there. My background is in multiple things, but I do bring to the table almost 15 years worth of residential and commercial construction. So I'm very comfortable with the conversations that are there, the terminology, things like that, and I do look forward to hopefully another year, sounds like, and yeah, it's nice to be able to have voting members all the time. I don't think there's been one meeting that we've had to postpone now. And again, I've made it to every meeting except for one, so I think it's nice to be able to have a couple alternatives so that you can get those votes done for the residents.
And the alternates are important because if you open a hearing, you need to have a quorum that carries through.
Well, we have to have at least four members, or we can vote with 3, but the applicant can refuse to accept or allow us to vote with just 3. They can force us to wait to another meeting with 4. It's best to have 5, and with having alternates, especially if other people have to recuse themselves, it's a wonderful thing. And both of these alternates are wonderful in that they take the time. We're given a packet ahead of time, and frequently it's minor things like can I add on to my deck that encroaches on the sidelines? And it matters if you're down at the lake and your lot is tiny, and you just want to add 2 feet to it, and your neighbor's going to be there and say, yeah, go for it, as opposed to if your lot is huge and you're being ridiculous. Both of these alternates take the time to actually drive past the locations and explore the situation. They're good alternates.
Good.
They're a real good addition, both of them, to the board.
Board members, any questions or comments for any of the 3 applicants? All right.
I do have one broad question for all 3 applicants, and that's the ZBA is sort of a study in contradiction in that the applicants that are most qualified are also the folks who have the most conflicts of interest, right? They're working in the real estate space, the development space, et cetera, yeah. Which I guess sort of necessitates some of the alternates. I wanted to know if you guys would each help us understand sort of where your conflict, you've touched on a little bit of your professional expertise, but help us understand where your conflicts of interest generally lie, how much work you do professionally in Littleton, et cetera.
So let's look at the Robinson Road property. The folks that own the Robinson Road property had come before the ZBA with a previous buyer asking for ability, it was before the new bylaw that allows accessory dwellings, and to come before the board asking for an accessory dwelling. I sat on that board and we granted the accessory dwelling. Then when the owners, that sale fell through, and when the owners came to me as a real estate broker that is within walking distance of that house and asked me if I could list it, I had to say, stop, I have to figure that out. I don't even know if I can. I ended up calling the, and I didn't think I could, but I ended up calling the Mass Legal Line for that question. And they told me as long as, and I went through, spent an hour on the phone with them going through each steps and details, and they told me I basically, if it came down to that, I should file a letter with the Board of Selectmen, and then I could represent the sellers, because it was obvious that when they came before us and granting their relief, I had no financial interest, nor did I advertise for them to come to me after we had granted that relief. So, but that would have been a conflict of interest. As it was a happiness, because instead of listing it, and instead of going through those hoops and trying to sell it, I was able to bring it to the attention of the necessary people in town to result in what happened, which is, thank you very much. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
And I didn't take any kind of commission or monetary compensation for that. And that was sort of my little contribution. But those kind of conflicts, for example, if our chair represents
Oh, I'm very familiar. I guess I was mostly interested in the nature of your business and your expertise.
If
What
I
are
had
the nature
sold-
of your
if I had
conflicts
sold
and
the
how
house.
frequently are you conflicted out
I'm
of?
not as much as others are.
Okay.
I can usually be there. Only, sometimes there was a situation where it was a situation with a neighbor that came through where I own property within a certain distance of that neighbor who was coming before us. At that point, I had to recuse myself. I didn't have to leave the room because I could still be there as a neighbor. And there have been a couple of situations where I had to leave the room. If I had any kind of financial gain or financial interest or had any financial interest within the previous year, then I cannot sit on a case. Does that make sense?
No, makes good sense. And just out of curiosity,
Yeah, so ironically, my first, right after I was appointed, I had to recuse myself for the first meeting because between the date of application to be appointed to the board and the appointment, I was hired by at the first attempt to sell the property and come before the ZBA for the buyer for the Robinson Road property. So I got to figure those logistics out. I haven't had any other conflicts since then, and as a general matter, I don't necessarily anticipate, because my particular work with real estate is fairly limited as part of my overall practice. It's a side part of it, unlike Cheryl being right in it, but it could come up in the future, but I don't see it as being a huge impediment by any means.
It hasn't been a problem for me. I mean, in the years that I've served, I've had to recuse myself, I think, a total of 3 times, over at least 8 years, maybe longer.
Okay, good question.
Can
Anything
I
further?
jump in? Sure. So obviously my family has a construction business here in town, and there's a possibility I could be a conflict of interest. Of all the meetings we've had, I haven't. A lot of them are more homeowners with additions or things like that, not so much in the realm of where we are as a family, but the nice thing with having alternates is that if there was, I would just recuse myself. I'd rather not put the board or myself in that position to have that question. I would just step out or remove myself if something like that was to come up.
The nice thing about having as many alternates as we do, we have 4 of them, I believe, is that if we had any doubts at all, we always recuse ourselves and step back. And there are some members who have to do it more often than others, and it's because we have the alternates, we err on the side of caution, which is a wonderful thing.
No, it's good. I appreciate each of your candor and sort of putting that out there and helping us understand where those conflicts may lie. Because like I said, the ZBA is a study in contradiction.
Right, by definition or by
Actually,
design.
it's a really nice committee to be on, because we're able to help people who want to put a little roof over their steps, and the bylaws don't allow them to put a little roof over their steps to go out, out their front door. That kind of thing is just a no-brainer, and just lovely to be able to say, yes, you can do that. Or someone who wants to put a ramp up because they have an elderly parent who visits them, and yet the ramp would be within the setbacks. Those are good things to be able to
You
do.
do good deeds, you're unopposed, we're gonna vote you in.
There's actually a Rotary Board meeting happening at my house right now.
Okay, well, we've got Conservation Commission, Library Trustees, other things too, so, thank you. I'll entertain a motion then on this one.
Can they be lumped together?
Sure.
Even though, okay, perfect. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Cheryl Hollinger, Kathleen O'Connor, and Jillian Shaw to a term on the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term expiring on June 30th, 2021.
Cheryl as a full member.
Cheryl is full member.
And Cheryl is a full member, Kathleen O'Connor and Jillian Shaw as alternates.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, well, we did do a pretty good job with the boards.
Did you want to appoint one of you as the transportation?
I don't know if there's interest, Chuck might be interested, or board members want to express interest, we do have that opportunity.
Because you seated a lot of that committee, but not.
Right.
Yeah, the planning board
We should
got
probably
theirs.
wait for Chuck, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd just as soon give him a.
Wait for Chuck, can we put Chuck
You
on?
could appoint us.
Oh. That'd be awesome.
That's how Peter Scott got on CPC.
Yeah, miss a meeting, that's all.
I was thinking, Jason,
All
I was
right,
thinking.
you're right, okay, we'll wait.
Okay, all right, next topic, I hope this will go quicker than it may have seemed last time we discussed it. We did have a chance to do I think, a very fruitful site visit at the Cloverdale location, conservation property, and we had Conservation Commission members there, Conservation Trust representation, selectmen, other town officials, and importantly, neighbors. And we had a chance to walk and visualize what we had been seeing previously in this form. And a lot of things, to my mind, came to light that weren't apparent just in the video presentation. Some of the protections afforded by trees that aren't as obvious, and that kind of map that when you're standing there, clearer, and some of the, the progress that has reduced some of the construction site appearance that it might have looked like at different points. There's clearly been work done and improvements made. So I don't know if anyone here is a spokesperson for the Conservation Commission, wants to characterize where we left things from the last meeting. There you go, step forward.
I'll take it on.
Yeah. I think we settled kind of consensually, we didn't take any votes or anything, we kind of settled on some key points to monitor going forward, and so.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but
Yeah.
I was stuck in traffic the whole time, so. I think what we're looking from you at this point is just consensus that we can go ahead and start talking to DOT about getting the access permit, which may or may not be needed to do the parking, while we go ahead and build the boardwalk that would go through it.
Okay, I know that there are a couple of topic areas that we want to make sure, and different board members raised question. One was on the parking, but also safety associated with the board, parts of the boardwalk itself. Even if the building commissioners have the opinion it doesn't require a permit, I think the board felt it was important to have that supervised anyway for safety purposes by him or his agent. And also there were some questions raised about the oversight on the financing as well. And I believe Bonnie spelled that out in a memo to us that it's consistent with previous CPC awards. So rather than me just proclaim where we ended up, I want to see if every board member here was able to attend. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and add any comment at this point. Cindy?
I was thrilled that we went out there and took a look at it. It's a beautiful piece of property. It really is, and I commend you for the undertaking, because it's quite a project. But to me, it's a worthwhile project. It's a stunning piece of property. I didn't have any thoughts on the curb cut or the parking. Personally, I know there was a discussion. I thought there was a mention during the site walk that there's another,
Access point. Yeah.
no, there was another just about laying the boardwalk down, that it wouldn't require, it would just kind of sit on the,
Yeah, it's sitting on
culverts, basically.
12-inch, or maybe it was 16-inch pipe.
Right,
That's what's
right.
on
Big
there.
Yeah,
area inside,
exactly.
yeah, so water can keep flowing through. You don't have to excavate, drive pilings or anything
Right.
like that. It's pretty firm out there.
Right.
Acton has a bunch of them, Stowe does.
right, I think there was a
I think
mention of
there were some
Acton.
pictures in there
Right, yep,
before.
great, thanks.
Joe?
I was impressed by the walk that we took. I think it's going to end up, when it's finally built, to be excellent. I think it was mentioned how it'll be one of the most level walkways that we have that could probably be used by senior citizens that wanted to take
Right.
a walk through part of a mile.
And you'll be able to see it.
Disabled
from
folks
right
too?
there,
Yep.
Yeah.
Right,
And I think it gives adults and kids a chance to be able to walk through wetlands and see things that they'd never be able to see. Because I know as a kid, the only time I went in the swamp was to get something out of there that went into it. And at least this way, you can walk right through it and see what it's all about. So I was impressed with it.
Yeah, I share all those points, and I think we went in there with some thought that, neighbors had raised concerns, and I give them the opportunity again now if you want to speak to it, but, I think the inclination is to tell the Conservation Commission to go forward, but to do a few things to, to keep these agreements in place. One is obviously to honor the financial oversight, and that includes that if there are emissaries such as Conservation Trust, who are not town boards, they still are answerable to you under your authority. Similarly, that you've done this, but before the construction takes place, have hearings, at your posted board meetings, so people can have some input as to perhaps changing the placing of certain things if that, if a good idea comes forward. And then the two safety things we mentioned, one is on the construction of the boardwalk, and two, making contact with Mass Highway to see whether or not the established use is already constitutes a curb cut, or whether we need to do anything different there. It seems like a great spot just naturally for the parking. Is that understanding consistent, Jim, and board members with what we talked about?
One clarification, at least it wasn't my understanding. Well, it says, my understanding was that the boardwalk should proceed independent of Mass DOT's determination of a curb cut.
Yeah, I guess we didn't.
Because Mass DOT
we
could
didn't-
take a certain amount of time, and I want to make
Yeah,
it.
right.
If I misunderstand, I guess I want to clarify that time.
Yeah, I guess we didn't discuss holding it in abeyance, waiting for that, so.
Right.
Contact should be made, but don't stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Rick Finley, I just wanted a clarification on the finances. You were referring to the CPC fund.
Yes.
Which goes back several years. What we're talking about for the boardwalk is a grant, which we have to spend the money first and then we get reimbursed.
Well, if the town's the beneficiary of either the grant or the CPC funds in the town, some town entity, we
Yes.
need to go say, I'm responsible
Yeah,
for that.
the town was the applicant for the boardwalk grant, and
Yes,
and
in
we hold
either,
the.
in either event, the Conservation Commission is the entity that's approving the use of the funds.
I know, I can see residents here, some were favorable, some weren't, so I give you another chance if you want to give any input. We want to make sure, even as we encourage them to go forward, that it's done with input from neighbors, so, Adam?
Rody Adama, 5 Old Farm Road, immediate butters, and looking at the Cloverdale schedule planning that was in the Selectmen's agenda packet. A quick question on the asterisk at the very bottom that mentions boardwalk will likely require wetland creation. This will happen in 2018 or 2019, depending on Littleton DPW availability. What does that mean? What impact will that have to abutters?
You want to speak to that?
The DEP has suggested that when the culverts are laid, that would be an impact to a wetland, about a square foot for each one. So they are strongly recommending that some mitigation be done. It'll be about 300 square feet total, and it'll be right next to the boardwalk. There's an old berm there, right there, yep. There's an old berm there, then we just pull out a little segment of it. We just need to get someone down there with the equipment to do it.
And that was discussed on the sidewalk, the area that may be.
Yeah, and it'll be more formally discussed at our next meeting, Concom's next meeting,
Which is next Monday then?
which is the 18th, yes.
Okay. All right, I don't think we need a formal vote here, Keith, on anything other than just a,
No,
an understanding of how we're going to proceed.
I would say that we do not need to take a vote, that they are authorized, that it's their property.
Right.
They were looking for guidance or further direction from you, but if they can proceed, then that's the message that can come back.
As we move ahead with DOT, we'd certainly be keeping you advised.
Absolutely, yeah, because they'd probably be working through Chris on that?
Yes.
Yeah, Chris Goddard.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments on that? Thank you, good luck.
Thank you
Let's
very
make
much.
it work for everybody. All right. Library trustees had requested time for an update. I know you've provided us with a PowerPoint, and just in recognition of the hour, I hope you'll focus on anything new or anything that, well, whatever, anything new would be most important, I think, but feel free
I timed it
to.
at home, and I can do it in 10 minutes.
Okay, terrific.
So we're going to go fast. Can I sit? Is that okay?
Absolutely, whatever you'd like. Yeah.
I've been sitting for a while. So my name is Chris Aslin, and I'm here on behalf of the trustees to update you guys on the library project. And I just wanted to take, I know we're running,
Well, we're the ones running late, not you guys.
Okay. I just want to take a quick moment. I know, everyone's tired, but I want to take a quick moment just to give you a little bit of a snapshot about what the library means to me, and then we'll just go right into the PowerPoint. So my 15-year-old daughter was a toddler, and I was searching for a place to take her on days when I wasn't working and she wasn't in daycare. I discovered the Rubenhorn Library. Prior to that time, I knew about the library, and I went, but I just trolled the shelves for murder mysteries or science fiction, but I didn't interact with the staff. Finding the children's room, I found a kindred spirit in Diane Haddock, our children's librarian. Not only did she provide a safe place for my precocious and curious toddler, she also gave support to that child's mother, who was a secret writer of children's books. Over the years, I brainstormed ideas with Diane, updated her in my progress, and celebrated milestones. Being able to walk into that same space and see my book on display or hear the staff tell me how often the book is on reserve means more than I can say, and if I talk too much, I get emotional about it, so we'll move on right from there. I've used the interlibrary loan for research for almost all of my books. I've reserved the meeting rooms for writing groups and for workshops and for Girl Scout meetings. I've spent hours working on manuscripts in the study carrels. I've spent a lot of time in the library. When the opportunity arose to run for a position on the board last year, I jumped in with both feet. And I'm grateful for the chance to give back to the library and the vibrant individuals who staff it. So tonight, we're going to review some statistics that might interest you about the library. I hope they will interest you about the library. We're also going to update you on where we are with the project. And if you have questions that I can't answer, there are a number of people present tonight who have my back and who should be able to answer questions that you might have. So with that, so we do a lot of things at the library. I'm not going to read these to you because you guys can read yourself, but we do a lot of things at the library. And as it turns out, we do more than the average library in the state of Massachusetts. We're more active. 79% of residents have a library card. That statistic says 79 are Littleton residents from the 8900, but it should be 79% of residents have a library card. A lot of people. We actually circulate double what other libraries do who are compared to us. The average library in our size town circulates only about 9 items per patron, and we circulate
That's
almost
significant.
like 2.
Anybody have an idea why?
Because it's a really great library. It needs a brand new place to have its books.
Active town. So in 2017, 180,000 items. To me, that was like one of the most incredible statistics to see. That's a lot of pieces of media, books, movies, other things that people are taking out.
I doubt it's an accident or a false correlation between circulation of the library and Littleton School District, right? And, you look at causation there, and where was this U.S. News and World Report's ranked Littleton? Top 20 or something?
So, yeah. And we also do more than books. We have our Museum Pass program. I say click, I'm a nervous clicker. And we have meetings at the library. We have lots of groups that use our space. We had 1,541 meetings.
30 a week.
Yeah. And one of the most interesting challenges that is faced right now is that we have many more requests for meeting space than we can actually accommodate. And we go on the internet at the library, 6,500 hours of internet time on the for our kids and also for our elders in the community. And we play at the library. We had over 480 programs last year, so that's an average of more than one a day. There's lots of things that are going on. And I probably don't need to tell all of you that Littleton has never built a designated library. In fact, the library that we are using was built as a school, and we moved in 1989. So there's three critical pieces, three critical concerns that we have as we move forward to the new space. Those are safety and ADA compliance, lack of space, and poor layout. Basically because it wasn't designed as a library, it was designed as a school. So just, I'm not going to make you guys read all of this detail, you have all of that in front of you, but just a little bit more detail about the challenges that people have in wheelchairs and with strollers, people coming in with a walker or pushing a child. We did have a couple of folks get stuck in the lift. I'm not sure if everyone realizes when you walk into the front of the library to the right, there's a lift so that people can maneuver. If they can't maneuver up the stairs, and there were two moments where that lift jammed, and it took almost 10 minutes to be able to free the person from the jam. We also have an ongoing roof. We think the roof is fixed. Since this slide was created, we believe that it's fixed, but fingers crossed. Hope that it's not working still. Our second concern, lack of space, and this was sort of new to me when I first became a member of the Board of Trustees, that part of the accreditation process is that we have to have new material. We have to constantly purchase new material. But because we are constantly purchasing new material, we have to weed old material, and there just isn't enough space for new stuff. And so we sometimes will have things that are only 2 or 3 years old that need to be removed from the library because we have
Makes for good book sales.
There are some really, well, it does make good book sale, yeah. And this is that other piece of information about 28 requests being denied over a 16-day period in February because of lack of space. And also lack of quiet workspaces for adults and students. And the last piece is the poor layout component. And again, I probably don't need to tell you guys, you've all been through the library multiple times. But I don't know if you do know that Littleton is often used as an example by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners as a why not to have a 3-floor library. We're kind of the poster child for why not to do that. It's just not particularly efficient, it's hard to keep track of kids, it's hard to staff. So, updates. So we have done a couple of things to try to stopgap the things that we've talked about. The elevator has been retrofitted, so previously you needed a key to use the elevator to go to the 3rd floor. That's been retrofitted, so we can now give access to anyone needing the elevator. They don't need to come and ask for permission to use that. Also, the back door to the library that's down near the Cooper Room door has been retrofitted as a handicapped entrance. So people can come in. It's far easier, actually, to come in the back door than to go in the front and use the lift. And then you can come up and use the elevator. We've also added shelves in the children's room, and that allows for more space for books because the shelves are higher, but it has a sort of an opposite effect in that I know Chase has young kids. When you're in the library, now they're tall enough that it's hard to see your kids sometimes if they're small. So it's a little bit, it's good because we can put more books in there, and also there's wider space for maybe a wheelchair or a stroller, but now they're higher, so it's harder to sort of see your kids, which is a safety concern. So we are going to modernize our library and create a new space. And this is a little bit of a timeline, which is kind of dense. I'm not going to go through it all, but the most important piece of this information is in 2017, we were awarded a grant for almost $6 million from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners construction grant. And we are in line based on a priority needs list. So we have the money, we just have to wait for it. That's sort of how that works. And currently we are number 3 in line. So we're actually really excited about that because it feels closer than it's been in a long time. These slides will be available to the public. I'm going to try to get them up online ASAP. And
They're online.
They're on, fabulous.
Anything on our
That's
agenda?
Excellent. Okay, great. So again, this is sort of just a little bit of history that you all know because you were all involved in it, but we have a slope site down behind where we are right now. The site's going to maintain that campus-like feel that we have, and it'll provide safe and easy access from the middle school and Russell Street. All right, so Our fundraising efforts, which you guys are probably super excited to hear about, have been really fruitful so far. We are over 400, actually, at last count, we we're at 419,000 raised towards our fundraising goals. The recent mini golf event back in March raised about $15,000 and actively involved community as well as businesses in town, excuse me. One caveat or one note I want to make while we're looking at this slide is I know that there's been a question, and it's probably the sort of the elephant in the room about the tax impact. And I just want to sort of say that we don't really know what that's going to be because we don't know what the final fundraising efforts are going to be yet. And we would definitely welcome assistance if you have any thoughts about, if there's a person or a group of people, members of our group, members of your group that could get together and sort of have an idea of what that tax impact might be. That would be welcome. So, a new library, the new library that we're planning to build is, this actually should not say an additional 22,000 square feet, it should just be 22,000 square feet. It will be 22,000 square feet. It will be ADA compliant, and we're hoping, and our goal is to make it more than ADA compliant. It's actually, we had a guest at one of our last meetings from a resident who actually used a term called preferred, so handicap or ADA preferred, so that they have a network that they will let people know that this is a preferred building. It is very easy to navigate. It's more than compliant. We would like that to be our goal. We'll have designated reading rooms. We'll have space for teens and elders. We'll have children's space. We'll have quiet spaces. We'll have a meeting room that will hold up to 120 people rather than the 49 that we have currently. And it's going to be a space that will hopefully serve our needs for many, many years to come. So, we are third on the list, as I mentioned. This means that we could hear as early as July that we can go forward. This, again, this slide is sort of self-explanatory, but we've had a number of our colleagues, I guess, in the library, local libraries that have received their grants, and they've been able to go forward with their building. Two in particular actually have gone forward prior to receiving their money because they are looking for those cost savings and getting their projects done before receiving the money. When they tell us it's time to go, we'll have 6 months to secure the remaining portion and vote. But we have moved up in line from in the last couple of months. So once the grant is awarded, and we know that we have the money coming, as I said, we have 6 months to approve at town meeting. And then the next steps would be looking at the design program again. And we do have a design. We can actually change that design. We're not limited to the design that's at hand. There are a couple of caveats to that. We do have to keep the size the same, but we can do some changing to that design if we feel like there's some other things that take precedent. It does need to remain a library. And then after that, engineering, bidding, and then construction would begin. So we think it would take about a year to a year and a half after the vote for the process to come to fruition.
Okay. And you folks are participating in the space needs process we get going, and everybody's waiting to hear the next shoe drop from the state on financing? Is that right?
Exactly. So that's our update. Any questions?
Who are our appointees? I've forgotten. You and?
Chuck.
You and Chuck.
Yeah.
What's your?
So we've been talking about this, Mark's on the Space Needs Working Group with us as well. Keeping us apprised, the Space Needs Working Group apprised of the library project. What we're looking at right now, the last meeting we have, we're scheduled for another meeting. This Wednesday night was the discussion about, as far as space needs goes, we have the library, we have the seniors, the Council on Aging Senior Center, and then we have the town offices, town departments. The library's already committed to the Slope site location. They already, as we just saw, have the project in place, have the funding. So really, the consensus among the working group was that we want to keep all the departments together. We know that the Council on Aging would like to be near the library. We know, with the proximity to the schools. We feel that the town departments would be suited to remain close to the library. and the Council on Aging just kind of creating a campus. And we discussed creating the campus here on the slope site, if we can fit. And we don't know that we can fit everybody here, but that was pretty much the last discussion that we had amongst the working group. It just seemed like the best approach going forward. But we're waiting on the library, to find out what happens in July with the grant funding and whatnot. But I think the consensus pretty much was to try to make it work in this location as opposed to buying land or using land elsewhere and breaking everybody up. I mean, you can't, the proximity to the schools is just such a huge benefit, I think, for all the town needs and departments that serve the community. So that was the discussion that we had the last time we met. But again, we don't know if it's going to work. We still have, there's lots of other variables to take into consideration. So we're researching those. The Council on Aging has formed a subcommittee for a senior center, and so they're kind of taking the library approach, coming up with the scope of space that they need, a design component. They're working on that right now. The next phase is to really look at the town departments and figure out what we need. One of the things that we did discuss at the last meeting was trying to free up some space by getting rid of some things in storage, some paperwork, documents that we might not need anymore.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I brought up during our goals too. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Any board member questions or comments?
I have a couple, if
Okay,
you don't mind.
sure.
Chris. One of my questions is on the design aspect of it, and you had mentioned that we have the ability to, let's say not redesign it, but modify the design. What's the timeline on beginning to consider modifications to the design and how they might fit with, say, Council on Aging? Maybe, I understand the library needs to be a library, but to the extent that we can incorporate things that would serve, for example, the Council on Aging really, really well and still fit them within the umbrella of a library, it makes sense to me to incorporate those ideas as soon as possible. What's the timeline on incorporating and reevaluating the design as it currently exists?
I'm going to defer to Sam Alvarez, Director of the Library. I believe he can probably answer that question better than I can.
So basically, once, if it passes, then we go to another schematic design phase.
Okay.
And so then that's when we would include members of the public to kind of contribute. We could go for another architect if we wanted. It doesn't have to stay with Johnson Roberts. So basically, we could discuss it then. It would be within a couple months of it passing a town meeting, basically.
Is there the ability to at least open up that discussion sooner than that, to at least understand what the questions might be or what the desires might be? You know, now that we've gotten very accustomed to what this current conceptual design looks like. but
Right,
it's
it's
evolved.
So Mark Einbacher, library trustee, I'm on the Space Needs Committee too. One of the things that I've been trying to get from the Space Needs Committee, it kind of goes to your question, Chase, is like when the seniors need meeting room space, or how much dedicated meeting room space do they need versus occasional meeting room space? And how big of a meeting room space do we need in town? Like we have the multi-purpose room that can seat however many. We probably don't need, 300-400 seat meeting rooms. We need to figure out how big of meeting room space the library should have that can serve the library needs and the overflow for the seniors and Park and Rec and things. And so I think those discussions are ongoing, but not in the point of redesigning the library right now. I mean,
And redesign seems like a strong word. I don't want to use that because that's not what I mean, but I think you know what I mean when I say redesign.
One of the things I was trying to get out of the general space needs from where we're at now is to take each department and say, how much dedicated space do they need for their offices and, meetings versus how much occasional space that they need, or, the overflow space or whatever, right? So that we can figure out, would the library meeting room be large enough and available sufficient enough time for the Council on Aging or other departments to use, or do we need 2 large meeting rooms,
Yeah.
things like that. So those discussions are kind of going on, or from the space needs, more from the library design. I think we can play with the library design once those discussions are more finalized,
Yeah.
right?
So you're suggesting engage in those discussions more broadly under the umbrella of the space needs
Right.
group?
Yeah, so
Right,
my,
and if it turns out the library needs a larger meeting room or a smaller meeting room, then we'll work on the library plans accordingly, right?
Okay.
But there's no real point in saying we need a larger one or smaller one until we know more the general consensus of
right.
what we need.
So Mark raised that at our last meeting, just trying to be cognizant of other departments and their general meeting room space and coordinating amongst all the departments to figure out because we don't want to duplicate space.
Right, we don't want to duplicate.
Right,
space.
yeah,
We
and
don't
so-
need to. And to the extent that we can fit it under the umbrella of, the library building, that's great.
Right, yeah, so we're working on that.
I just had a question in terms of what there must be guidelines of when you move from eligible expenses to ineligible expenses for your project costs. That somehow the Mass Board of Library Commissioners views certain uses of the facility as eligible, and I would guess certain as ineligible, and I didn't know, as the planning is going on here, are there guidelines or things that the group can be mindful of, so that if we can see convenient ways to incorporate the needs of other non-library departments into the library, that we're not crossing the Mass Board of Library Commissioners line and moving that space from eligible to ineligible for the grant.
So, I don't know, Sam, you know what,
So, as far as MBLC, ineligible costs would be things like furniture, computers. Basically, how they described it to us is if you took the building, tipped it over, anything that fell out is ineligible. So, as far as the rooms, that's all considered eligible costs. How we use them can be determined in the future. I mean, right now, we actually are working with Liz Dimitra, another trustee, and I. We met with Liz the other day to discuss how the library and COA can work together. So on July 26th, we're holding a music program in the library where seniors are invited. It's for seniors. It's going to be a jazz singer. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're going to have the seniors come by. We're going to have some snacks for them. We discussed with Liz the possibility of maybe. So one of our meeting room policies is that any library-sponsored program supersedes any other person trying to use one of our spaces. So maybe the library could sponsor some programs for COA. So we're working with her to do that now, basically. So I don't see why that couldn't work in the future. So maybe we can't provide them with office space, but we can certainly provide programming space.
And I'm only going to use this example to be illustrative, not because I think it necessarily is needed or fits, but I know one of the COA's concerns has been the ability to hold larger meetings with small, breakouts, small office where a nurse and a senior can meet privately. So we would be able to incorporate that idea into a library meeting room structure that happens to have a couple of ancillary study rooms adjacent to it that could also fit that need simultaneously, and it would still fall under the umbrella of.
Right, so the plan for the new building would be for private study rooms that would be small enough to do something like that. And so while we couldn't promote that to MBLC, we could definitely use those rooms for that purpose in the future.
Sounds like the process in place for constructive dialogue and comprehensive review of things while they're happening in their own little spheres is working. And, that's good. And I hope that works to your ultimate success with your project, and I hope that collectively the project works too. But right now, we've got, everybody's got a seat at the table, and you get the ability to kind of work in your own little autonomous spheres, and then you also get the cross dialogues, and
Right.
and
I think the dialogue's been really good and productive so far, so it should continue.
comment, Gary?
I just had a question because I haven't been privy to a lot of the day-to-day discussions. I'm just wondering, For the space that the library would be vacating, is that what's being considered for expanded town offices and council on aging, or are you guys thinking about new space for any of these areas?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that
A
far yet.
lot of that's all still
We
on the
haven't gotten
table.
that far yet at all. Great
Or
question.
it could even be to a
Right.
new building where we're sitting now.
Right,
A lot of stuff's on the
Lots
table.
of
Yeah.
options.
They just began their work.
yeah.
Okay,
If
but now,
it's some-
right now you're just trying to figure out how much you need, at some point down in the future.
And what the different options
You know,
are too.
Right.
You know, square footages and the
Right.
type of space.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you would indulge, I had two other
Go right ahead.
One was, so far you've raised a bit over $400,000. Can you briefly lay out the plans for us for additional fundraising up to and through the construction? I know trustees had been in here at one point or another to discuss sponsorship opportunities, corporate outreach, et cetera. So can you give us an update on where that is and where, most importantly, where you see that going?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is still on the table. We're working on some initiative to do sort of a number of households in town to have a certain goal, minimum dollar amount per household. We're gonna sort of roll that out towards the end of the summer. We're looking at some of these large donor opportunities as well, where it gets sort of everything on the table at this point. I don't necessarily have something to report to you as to sort of what, we're just hoping to sort of, as much as we can, to offset the cost of the space, but.
And you're working on or have prepared a plan to that effect? How is that?
Yeah, we actually
How is that sort
we
of
have a
being scaled up?
fundraising committee that's an offshoot of our, the Friends of the Library. And that group is working on fundraising. And they have some ideas for events, and like I said, that we're working on this sort of household, I don't want to say too much, because I don't want to kind of unveil too much that group is working on, but we have sort of a program that will go into place midsummer, towards the end of the summer.
They
that will be
update us
a fundraising.
periodically
Yeah.
on that front too.
So for most of the fundraising is not being done by the trustees, it's
Right.
being done by the
Fundraising committee.
by the offshoot from the Friends.
And the trustees are.
We're
Involved, yeah.
involved, but we're not the overseer of it.
Okay. That's how I understood it, but I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that. And then the last line of questions or comments was about the tax impact. So you sort of touched on the tax impact, and this is more directed at the rest of the Board of Selectmen. I think we're getting to the point where it may make sense to actually start to put numbers on paper, and I would hesitate to ask the trustees to do that. I would rather.
Yeah, no, it's the modeling, it's something we can ask the finance department to do. We have to consider too that it's not necessarily an all or nothing proposition.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying is-
Some could be carried under the levy limit and some could
Right.
be not.
And that's what I would suggest is perhaps two scenarios where we do, $1.5 million out of capital stabilization and the rest over the levy, where we perhaps look at a couple of scenarios that the Board of Selectmen, maybe FinCom,
Right. So
trustees.
Steve
sort of
Venuti's at
aggregate.
all the meetings,
Yeah.
all the space needs meetings, and there has been discussion about that. I guess we should bring the rest of the board up to date on
Okay.
those discussions.
I wouldn't want to get too finite at that level too, because
No.
before numbers get proposed and
They're
then defense.
extremely
and massaged,
hypothetical, yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's just, if you all of a sudden have got a formula for paying for a number and then that number's no longer justifiable,
Right,
then,
right.
but.
Yeah, those.
but
But
all
I would
of
like
that-
to ground it, on the optimistic side of realistic and the pessimistic side of
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah.
And what's the ballpark we're talking
Right.
about?
I'm sure we can carry some chunk of it under the levy limit.
I guess
but
that's what
don't
I'm
know
thinking, but,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but what
and
does that
Steve
mean?
has been asked that, he has worked out some scenarios, extremely raw, like nothing.
Right, he's got to make 1,000 assumptions.
Yeah,
what are
exactly,
bond rates
exactly,
and what-
so, those discussions have taken place, we're just bringing everybody up to speed on that.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to understand what the
Right.
ballpark is.
Can I just ask Jenna one thing? I did not mention in member updates the event coming up.
Do you want me to mention it?
I do,
Okay.
please.
So, it was brought to my attention that there are many people who are reaching out in the informal world of Facebook for mental health supports for either themselves or their family members. And invariably, there's one woman who has stepped forward in private messages, who I happen to be friends with, who she gives help to them. And she and I were speaking, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a community conversation about mental health issues? And she said, well, I'm happy to help with that. So we have two people from the Department of Mental Health, one who works with children, youth, and families, and the other who works with adult services. We have folks from Wayside Services, and there's another group whose name I'm forgetting, and then there's a woman who lives in town. Anyhow, it's a community conversation about mental health. When I called the library to reserve the Cooper Room and gave them 9 separate dates, every single night was filled. I'd just been at the ribbon cutting, which was really a hose decoupling at the fire station, and thought, they have lovely new space.
Yes.
So I called over there, and I have reserved the training room at the fire station from 7 to 9 on Wednesday, June 20th, to have a community-wide conversation. Folks who are interested can RSVP at mentalwellness01460@gmail.com.
You want to repeat that? I'm not sure. We don't have it on the screen. You want to repeat that?
It's in Action Unlimited. It should be in the Independent. Kelly Clenchy, our superintendent, will be sending it out by email through their principals on Friday. It's a really great opportunity to know that there is more out there than what is sort of conveniently or inconveniently offered through other pediatricians' offices or what have you. So,
Yeah. I forgot to mention it, so I knew
that's
okay,
right.
perfect.
Hopefully
Thank
it'll
you.
be so well publicized that people will say, you know, it's the thing to do on the 20th of June.
The current rating nicest room in town we have to offer, too.
Well, hey, terrific.
All right. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Cindy.
Welcome, thanks.
Okay, now Keith, I know you can talk all night about transportation, but you won't.
Yes, it's going to be real quick. I put this on just to make note, as has already been mentioned, that we have launched the shuttle for the Littleton Westford commuter rail shuttle from the station that we had the launch last Monday night. And it's been recognized by the governor's office and our legislators. We had 7 people using the shuttle the first day of operation, and we had about 10 for each of the subsequent days, and we're continuing to get information out. I did want to report that we're working with IBM's landlord about the idea of a park and ride facility there. We're in discussions right now about 12 spaces. And while I cannot report, and I've shared with the board what that license agreement looks like, town council has reviewed it, we've got some language that we're reviewing, but that if the board felt that it was okay, I prepared a vote of authorization to approve the license agreement in a form subject to approval by town council, and we can schedule it for the next meeting 2 weeks from tonight. I don't have the final form of the agreement, and we'll probably have much back and forth, but I did want to report that we are trying very hard to get 12 park and ride spaces at the IBM lot. We're in communications with them. The number 12 comes from the number of spaces that there are in the shuttle. And if we get good with this, and MART, the Montechusett Regional Transit Authority, could press into service larger equipment. But at least in terms of the discussion that we've engaged with IBM, we're looking at the potential for 12 spaces. I do not have tonight that we would be prepared to proceed, but I just wanted to, I guess I'll plant the seed tonight, and it would be fine with me if we brought this back for a vote 2 weeks from tonight, but I did want to give you that update.
Okay.
So that's the update.
All right, fine, thank you. 2 weeks, we'll see it again.
Can I have clarification?
Sure.
Is that, so the intent for those people who are going to be commuting into the city, that they would park there and the shuttle would take them for the morning rush hour?
Yes.
Train in? Okay. And
Yeah,
back?
yeah, yes, it would be for use for folks who live in town who found that there were no parking spaces because it's 7:46.
Right.
And they're all gone.
Okay.
So it would give them somewhere else. We would also have the ability on the shuttle to pick up folks anywhere along the shuttle route. So if they can find someplace else to park and get out to King Street and flag the shuttle down, that's another way to make use of that shuttle in the, typically for the, morning commute.
Okay.
Be happy to work with the Transportation Advisory Committee on this and other things.
All right.
Next is a vote on, speaking of MART, that there's an annual appointment as the town of Littleton's representative to the MART Advisory Board.
Did we put that out for bid, Keith?
By statute, it goes to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen unless the Board of Selectmen designates someone else. And for all of my time here, you've designated me, so.
Don't want to see a grown man cry.
Anthony, what are you doing?
They do have pizza. Yeah.
Is that one of the things you're allowed to eat?
Well, yeah, I haven't had that come up yet. So
All right, well,
they
look,
have salads there too.
let's move and appoint our good administrator to the position, please.
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to reappoint Town Administrator Keith Bergman to serve as the Town of Littleton's designated representative on the MART Advisory Board for a term of July 1st, 2018 through July 30th, 2019, and to so notify the Montechusett Regional Transit Authority.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, the next one's kind of housekeeping too, is that right?
It is. Each year, after town meeting, we bring to the board the set of management employee contracts for you to vote to amend those consistent with the salary schedule adjustments that have just been adopted by town meeting. The other thing that we do there are two categories of contracts, those that are authorized by statute, which are the police and fire chief and the town accountant and the town administrator. And the others are those that are, while not authorized specifically by statute, our practice and town council advice says that we can enter into 1 year at a time memorandum of agreement, and that's what we've done with the two deputy chiefs and most recently with the assistant town administrator as well. So in all cases, what we're looking is to have the salary levels adjusted to those that are reflected in the salary schedule that was just adopted by town meeting, which implemented a new pay and class plan, went from 8 steps to 10, and then had a 2% cost of living adjustment on top of that.
Understood. Any questions, comments, motions?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to implement effective July 1st, 2018, fiscal year 2019, amendments to the classification and compensation plan as approved by the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting at the equivalent grade and step dollar amounts. A, by extending the one-year agreements with Deputy Chief Jeff Patterson, Deputy Fire Chief Tom Clancy, and Assistant Town Administrator Anthony Ansaldi through June 30th, 2019, and B, by amending the existing contracts with Fire Chief Scott Wodzinski, Director of Finance and Budget, Town Accountant Bonnie Fleck, and Town Administrator Keith Bergman.
Second.
And just to note, the reason why the police chief is not listed here is because the contract that you approved already had FY 2019 figures in it.
Gotcha. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, minutes. Hopefully, this is the last time we will be sitting in June voting on minutes from February, so I know we'll make a
They
point.
went to March.
February, March, April, and April. in this
We gotta
batch.
get caught up and we gotta
Oh,
maintain
February,
that.
Yeah, I
March,
think
and
this
April in
this
this
is catching
batch?
us up.
Yeah.
Next time, you'll
Yeah.
have May minutes.
I've read through them. I don't have any problems. Cindy, have you,
No, I didn't catch anything.
Yeah, I didn't have any comments.
part of it is I don't even remember these meetings.
I presume that the transcript was faithfully.
They were all on LCTV.
Yeah, all right.
You can watch them again.
All right, I have a handgun up front of my head. Spin the barrel.
Are we in HD now?
I have never once in my life watched a selectman meeting on cable. No.
Are we in HD now? We have to- No, I don't know if we've upgraded.
I'm looking for a motion.
Go ahead, Chase, you want to do it?
Sure. I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of February 26, March 26, April 10, and April 23rd, 28.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the cited minutes as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Before we go to executive session, there's a couple of pages, I don't know whether this got accidentally put into my packet. It had to do with on-premises signs, temporary signs. It must have just been left in the copy
Well,
machine.
yeah, I think that, yeah, for those of you who get paper copies, it's, we.
Those of
our
me?
Our photocopy machine is shared with the building inspector, so
Okay.
maybe-
All right.
maybe you've.
The other
maybe
update
you've
I
just
wanted.
issued a permit,
Oh,
so.
before we go into executive session, the other update I wanted to give is just on a couple of topics. One is Keith and I have met a couple of times now, and if there's a theme to this year's administrative plan, we're going to try to focus on improving communications, how well we communicate amongst each other, since we all have different assignments, and it's easy for people to be out of the loop on what each other are doing. Channeling the flow of information better to the membership. That involves, you've seen Keith do some of these updates, which I think are very helpful about what he's doing, about reminding us of various agenda topics. It's easy when you get something once and then 2 weeks later you've forgotten it's on the agenda, so those are very helpful. So that, and then doing everything in a timely fashion, and being very sensitive on certain topics, whether they're involve legal issues, personnel issues, or or land purchase issues, that there's a confidentiality factor, but there's also a need-to-know factor on the board members' parts, and we gotta find a happy balance to make sure everybody's in the loop. To it, we first heard about this business with the DCU building last Tuesday afternoon. Schedule a meeting for this afternoon, and you're gonna get updated on it tonight. So, and then we'll also get updated on the other land of the Kimball property, which we haven't been updated on in a while. So before we go into an executive session, though, because our intention is to come out and adjourn the meeting, following up on last week's topics, the way we left it on rules and regs was that there'd be a subcommittee, Chuck and I, to handle that. That's fine. But before we did that, we would send off the various pieces to departments to have them review their own. Is that underway?
And yes, it is, that I notified all the departments that next day. It was an agenda topic at a monthly staff meeting last Tuesday. Anthony and I are following up. When I say that, I mean Anthony is following up with the departments, and I've gotten feedback from a few already.
Yeah.
And it's for your meeting on July 9th that
Okay.
we will have the critique. The town clerk is also
Helping in that process. Yeah.
going through, and rather than give you an annotated, a red line version of a 250-page a document, we will have lists, might be, I don't know, 10, 15 pages worth of particular comments of proposed changes as a reference that you can look
Yeah.
at along with the 250 pages.
What I'd like to, on top of that, thank you, request as well, the departments are doing that process. I know Cindy's already completed her list of topics, and if it's either something you think doesn't look right and ought to be changed, something you don't understand, you have a question about, or something you want to change, compile a memo, send it along, and then after we get the draft from Keith and the departments, Chuck and I will take a shot at incorporating everybody's ideas and then come back with a draft. We'll be working on this over the summer. Similarly with the goals, we actually did great progress there, and I would suggest, I spoke to Chase.
4/5 of us did.
Yeah, right. But what I'd encourage you, and if, you can choose to take whatever tack you want, but, I think watching the meeting might, before you put your own memo together, might be a good way to, here I go, I would never do that if anyone recommended it to me, but, you might want to do that. But otherwise, give us a memo, and then Keith, you're probably not too far away from presenting an updated draft on the goals matrix.
Yep.
All right, good.
Good. If there's any chance we can get that before the next meeting, if you can get your input in.
Yeah,
and
I
we
should
can
be
work
able
it.
to get my info to you by the end of this week. Keith.
Yeah, I could get a revised matrix out by the end of the week.
Well, let's wait to see what
sure.
Chase offers. We'll put the burden on them.
Actually, if it's all the same to you, probably 5 PM on Friday and 8 AM on Monday, if they're effectively the same time.
They are, I'm sure they're the same.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
So, that's that. Okay, so we're ready to go into executive session?
Yep.
Someone want to read the motion?
Accept it. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 6, to go into executive session to consider the value of real property, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the board's negotiating position, and not to convene an open session thereafter.
This is a roll call vote, so I will go around the board. Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Mr. Gerbig?
Aye.
Mr. Glavy votes aye as well. So we're going into executive session, and we will not convene an open session.